Test. Right, we are live, Chair.
Okay, all right, everybody. Hello and welcome to the September meeting of the Admin and Public Works Committee. We've got a pretty good agenda here this evening and some guests in the room, so we'll get started here pretty quickly. Amy, if you don't mind, if you would please call the roll.
Chair Farmer,
Here.
Councilmember Marshall,
Present.
Councilmember Albers,
Here.
Councilmember Mabry,
Here.
Councilmember Preston, Councilmember Nyan, Councilmember Vanek,
Here.
Councilmember Bacher.
Present.
All right. With everybody present and accounted for, that brings us to the approval of minutes from our last meeting in August. Mr. Marshall?
So moved.
All right, Mr. Marshall makes a motion to approve the minutes. Anybody care to second? Seconded by Mr. Albers. Any discussion or edits or anything like that? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The minutes pass. That brings us to our public participation. We have a couple guests in the room that those of you on Zoom will be able to sort of see here shortly, I think. For those of you that are wanting to speak this evening, we do have some speaker cards up there. If you can just turn those in with Amy so we can kind of just keep track of who everybody is. We keep our public participation, everybody gets basically 5 minutes to speak. It's a time for you to speak. You can certainly ask some questions, just as sort of a weird way that it works. We're not actually technically allowed to answer them at that time, but you're free to ask them. And we just ask you to, please be, you're certainly free to say whatever you'd like, but if you can try to be as concise as possible, since there's a lot going on and a lot of folks to talk, we would surely appreciate it. So with that, Amy, you got some speaker cards.
First one is Ken Mazinas.
Right.
Do I sit or stand?
Whatever makes you most comfortable. It's kind of a weird setup with the camera. Everybody will be kind of pointed at the back of your head there, but the microphone is up in the ceiling here, so it'll pick everything you're saying.
All right.
up.
Great. Well, first of all, Mr. Farmer, your email to me was excellent. And it came at a unbelievably appropriate moment, which was this morning. So what I did was I was making some notes and I thought, well, why don't I just go through this quickly? It's just 4 little notes I put, or 4 little areas I put on here. And I just wanted to answer my thoughts as to what you sent me, which I thought was good. The first thing is the city has received, and by the way, I'm reading from Mr. Farmer's email. The city has received complaints about the outside of the subdivision deteriorating conditions. I couldn't agree more, and I did agree the last time, and I also said I was going to fix it, and I did fix it. I would like to say I did it myself. I did not. There were 3 other neighbors that helped, and once we got, that tree was unbelievably a mess. But once we got everything done, Midwest Lawn stepped in and took care of the sodding and whatever, and it moved along very nicely. The next part is that you had said that the closure has largely been symbolic and a semi-private access. Well, once again, I kind of have to agree with you on the semi-private access. Not that we want it to be a semi-private access, but nonetheless, it's not symbolic. It was for safety first. It certainly was. So 1 or 2 of our residents would drive across that. And unfortunately, it's true, but what can I say? We've taken the steps to alert these people and to ask them not to do it. And I don't know what comes after this, maybe putting liens on their homes or something if they keep destroying property, but what happens there. The third part is, which I think is probably the most interesting. You said you had lengthy discussions with the fire, police, and the Board of Public Safety. I've got to tell you, just from the city of Wildwood, listen, when you call here, which I did today, and you ask for the person in charge of public safety, the director, there is none. And so I'm not sure I would use that terminology because there is no Board of Public Safety. I was switched over to Rick Brown, which I've spoken to, so I didn't need to go to him. But I did speak to Mr. Brown. I also spoke to the the fire marshal, Joe, and in person, I was speaking to these people, Joe Hafer, and also right out here, Officer Brian McCoy. And I would have talked to Captain Mundell, but Brian kept telling me every time I'd call him, he goes, well, he's off another day. He's just not going to be here today. But don't worry, he'll be here on Monday. Well, I called today and he said, well, apparently he took off then. I called him today and said, no, he's still not back yet. This man has banker's hours. But nonetheless, I did speak to these people, and I want to point out 4 things they all said exactly, almost to the letter. Number 1, and I quote, I'm quoting Rick Brown first. Turnberry Place is not a cut-through. End of quote. It has to be 38 feet wide to be a cut-through. City ordinance, or not city, but county ordinance. Ours is 26.1. It has to be 38 to be a cut-through. It isn't a cut-through. They all said that. Number 2, they all said this: emergency access is not a problem with the current accessibility off of Strutker onto Turnberry Place or Turnberry Place onto Strutker over the delineators. In fact, Joe Hafer said, I have no problem whatsoever taking my 40-ton fire truck and driving over those. And the police said the same thing. So this hasn't been an issue. It has not been an issue for 29 years. Precedence is in force, and so is the grandfather rule. Now, if there's no problem there, why are you trying to make it a problem? 3, they all said this. Also, the first responders at the fire department on Clayton and Hutchinson, which you know where that is, stated when training new recruits, quote, avoid Turnberry Place, end of quote. How much clearer can this get? Then they all agreed that Turnberry Place should not be used due to, number 1, safety reasons. Number 2, too hilly, too curvy, too tight, too many parked cars, too many work trucks, and too many children. I sent you pictures of that. This was right over the weekend. We had little kids going up and down the street on their bicycles, playing on the street, kicking balls and stuff. This is what it is on our street. I mean, what could possibly happen if you open that street up and we have more traffic through? What could possibly go wrong, gentlemen? Last thing, the discussion tonight is not about reopening to adopt the followed correct. Has everything been done correctly with regards to the committee? Well, I'm not going to get into that, but I think they will. What I would like to touch on, though, is this. You had wrote, the city will work to make sure any reopening is done safely and with care. I've got to tell you, I've heard no one ever be concerned with safely reopening. What the hell does that mean? Safely reopening? What is that? Was that the jackhammer is not going to throw concrete in somebody's window? Safely reopening? I'll tell you what I have heard is only safety from reopening, not safely, safety from reopening. And one more thing, and then I'm done. I am living proof. My wife and I moved in 99. We built a $2,000 brick mailbox in 2000. A group of young kids, I hate to say it, but young boys, drove into it off of Strutker. They came down off of Strutker and they drove into it a year after we put it in. They got away with doing it. I couldn't get their license number quick enough and they drove off. I had to rebuild another one or put another one in. That's a $4,000 mailbox I've got sitting there now. And by the way, it wasn't raining. It wasn't at night. It wasn't snowing. There was no ice. There was no sleet. It was a Labor Day weekend, just like yesterday. And they drove into it. Now, if those kids had been on that street, on that sidewalk, you know, what would have happened? So, yeah, I understand where you're all coming from, but you have to understand where we're coming from after 29 years of being there, or 26 in my the way we lived. when we bought in there, we knew that that street was not gonna be opened because it had already been set into place. And the people, I gotta tell you, I have only found one resident that can go back further than me, and that's the next door neighbor. He bought in 1990, and he was one of the ones that complained about people driving too fast. So, anyway, I appreciate your time, and once again, thank you for sending that. It really was a good email, and I loved your part. So, thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
Gary Schrader.
All right. Mr. Schrader, you can come up or not. It's up to you, however you want to do it. The mic will pick you up anywhere.
Okay, come up. Seems like the appropriate place. Anyway, I'm not here representing anybody but myself, but I am a resident of Turnberry. I live on Turnberry Place Drive. I bought my house there 8 years ago-ish. The road was closed, had been closed for 20 years, I'm guessing, a long time. I was a resident of Wildwood before that. Lived whatever, over here, moved there, knowing the road was closed. I mean, and opening the road is a problem. Okay, it's gonna be a hazard for me. It's gonna be dangerous for the kids. I don't have kids. I mean, that age. My kids are 35, you know. But I do have grandkids that come over. I don't want to be worried about them that they can't step outside the house because there's people that are be cutting through there, and it is a bad cut through. Like I said, I had kids that are 35 years old, so 20 years ago, they were 16. Yeah, I know what they did. They were speeding down Strecker and turning in Turnberry because it was a nice shortcut. And it has been stopped mostly. I mean, we can try and police it better. We can put up game cams or other cameras, and I'm sure the subdivision, we've had the meetings, we're talking about doing whatever we can to try and keep it closed. We want to work with the city. So we're just asking the city to work with us, not just decide that it needs to be open for, I don't know whose benefit. There doesn't seem to be a benefit to anybody, but it is a detriment to the residents of Turnberry. So anyway, please represent us as residents of Wildwood. Keep our benefit or our good stature or our safety in mind, please.
We'll surely do our best.
Thank you.
Lauren Jordan.
Is it okay if Bridget goes first?
Sure. Bridget Fisher.
Good evening. You've heard from a couple of the other residents of Turnberry Place that there's a lot of passion behind keeping this road closed. And we all have a lot of passion. And Lauren will talk a little bit more about the amount of residents that live in our neighborhood and who has been there for what period of time. After review of the assessment, though, we have put together some facts that show that the score that we received was not appropriate to put Turnberry Place back on for opening. Looking at the emergency services function category of the assessment, we, as Ken told you, we spoke with both the fire department and the police department. There have been no issues with their services and their access to not only our neighborhood, but other neighborhoods. We believe that the score of 30 should actually be a score of 0, not only based on the conversations that we have had with the fire department and the police department, but it states that if it's not a legal turnaround, the fire trucks, the police cars, they do not have to turn around at that entrance. They can drive over. That entrance was designed for emergency vehicles to gain access there. It's closed to all non-emergency vehicles. Therefore, it is not applicable to that intersection to receive that 30-point score. We believe that the 0 scoring is what that assessment should be based on. Based on that alone, that would put our score well below the 70-point threshold, making this a non-issue. Beyond the emergency services, there is the public connectivity function. If you look at our road, there is Turnberry Place Drive serves no other neighborhoods, no other areas besides the homes in Turnberry Place Drive. So it is not even a public connectivity street. Your sole purpose of getting onto Turnberry Place Drive is to access a home within Turnberry Place Drive. Therefore, the score that we received of 25 should be also a 0. A connector road is one that connects two parallel streets. Both Strucker Road and Clayton Road intersect just down the street from Turnberry Place Drive. Therefore, there is no reason to utilize Turnberry Place Drive. We're not to cut through. We are not trying to make it a private neighborhood. We are not trying to restrict anybody from coming into our neighborhood. We are trying to keep our streets safe for our residents, for our children, and make sure that there is no tragic accident that happens within the streets of Turnberry Place Drive, because I don't think anybody wants to see that happen. And based on the information that was presented originally to close that road, that is a great potential. So we ask that we keep this road closed for the safety of Wildwood residents in Turnberry Place neighborhood. Thank you.
You.
Great. Appreciate the committee taking time to listen to us and receive our emails. And I'm not quite sure how effective this is without being able to have discourse, some kind of conversation. So I'll just ask you all 3 questions, right? With a bonus for final. But I'll do that after I present this data in response to some of the comments that were at the previous council meetings. 92% of the homes, of the 142 homes. Councilmember Mabry, are you able to engage us? Hi. Sorry. Yeah, so 92% of the homes, the 142 homes in our neighborhood are new residents that were here after the closure of our road. Other point is that the delineators were not removed purposely, whatever rumor hearsay rose that idea to the council. It's not true. We've replaced those on August 11th. There was some issue on how we purchased those since I've never purchased them. We got the delineators in there. We had Midwest Lawn. We paid the money to get those in there. We want that emergency access to be upheld. Number of community members have worked in that area at the Strucker entrance / emergency access / intersection to beautify it, even though beautification is a minor point within the score review. I mean, I could go on, but I'm frankly a little exhausted at like just talking to you all without having feedback that I think we're entitled to as residents of the neighborhood and of Wildwood. We had one meeting early on with Mr. Mabry, Mr. Lee, Mr. Brown. And then we had a series of the council meetings that didn't really add up to what we heard in those meetings. So we're a little confused as a community. So that brings me to my 3 questions, right? I'd like all of you to just ask yourselves, and I may or may not present this to the full council, but what we'd like you to do is consider, why did this become an issue? Right? What is needed from the community to keep the road closed? To ensure our safety, right? I think we've been very respectful and tried to lay out the points, but just please humor me. What is needed from the community to keep that road closed? What will be the cost of opening the road? Aside from the money, which I feel could be put to better use, but that's you all's job to decide that, right? So respectfully. And then finally, have the residents of Turnberry Place been given a fair shot at keeping this road closed and offering whatever it is the council decides is necessary to keep it closed. We're willing to work with the council. Again, I think we've been very respectful. I think we will continue to be that way and trying to make our point for something that we've all become accustomed to, not only accustomed to, right? We were not there prior to the road closure. So we'd like to simply go on about our lives and add the Strecker entrance to our maintenance queue, right? Let's move on. But again, it's all you all's decision here as the Public Works Committee to see what kind of priority this is, as I understand it. And then it's up to the council members to decide, do we really want to take taxpayer dollars and put it towards this issue? Which we're willing to work with you on. So I again appreciate everyone's time. I hope that, you know, this becomes a non-issue and it just goes away. But if it doesn't, then you'll have a lot of community members that will continue to have to talk about this because it's a very important issue to us. So, thank you.
Bill Crawford.
Thank you for having me. I was moved into the neighborhood in 2004, so I was the perpetrator who created the document that was submitted in 2009. So I'm an engineer by trade. I'm vice president of engineering for Clayco Corporation here in town. The analysis that was done in 2009 still exists today, still goes towards the St. Louis County Highways and Traffic Standards that were in play in 2009. The rules are still the same. The curves are the tightest curve on the steepest slope twice in our neighborhood. And the radius and the distance if cars are parked on both sides of the road create an unsafe situation for cars coming down the road at 20 miles an hour. And that was even reduced down from 25 because they recognized that it was an unsafe condition. So just the history is there. At the time in 2009, Natalie McAvoy, an original Turnberry Place, was helped or went through all the blood, sweat, and tears to get the road closed. And so there was a lot of effort that went to do that. And I think they've shown commitment to so far to our commitment to keep it closed. The other thing I believe that needs to be discussed here is we mentioned the $33,000 budget to open the road. That Rick's budget was created for that. You know, in the presentation we gave at the last council meeting, we've been committed to spending the money to upgrade the entrance on our own through a special assessment. The way the timing of all that went, in my mind, was a little bit suspect because it was a future-looking thing in June. All of a sudden in July, the report comes out, we don't get to see it, and the meeting happens in July and this vote happens, and then we come in August to try to figure out how that all happened. But that's neither here nor there. I think the idea is that we are committing to do a substantial investment into making that entrance look good. You know, we have 142 constituents, just like you have rules to fund things and get things funded. So we have to get a special assessment done and things that we have to do to create the funding to do the work that we're doing, but we're committed to do that. We're committed to put up cameras to catch the people from our neighborhood that are doing this. And we're committed to find those people as well. And we're committed to create a budget within our Turnberry Place to ensure that we maintain, we can agree, and we'd like to meet with Rick and his team to be sure everybody agrees on what that's gonna look like. And we gave a rendering of it. We spent the time and money to have a rendering generated for that. It's our investment. You save the $33,000. It's our money, and we believe it's gonna look just as good the way that is. So just wanna be sure you guys understand the commitment that we have to make this right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Donald Horskamp.
Yeah, it just came to my attention not long ago that they're planning to open it, and I said, huh, why that? What's the agenda working behind that decision? And I still don't know. If it's simply because of the aesthetics of it, I think we've certainly got engineers here that can take care of that, probably for less than $33,000. Those delineators that are there now, it's easy for somebody to run over one of them and get in that way. Probably some attention needs to be paid to that, maybe put up 4 times more delineators than we have now. A fire truck can still mow them down, no problem. As far as a cut through, 38 feet or 39 feet or 27 feet. I don't think anybody's gonna be getting out with a ruler in the morning when they're late for work, cutting through. Right now, sometimes traffic will back up from Strecker on Turnberry Place Drive, a block, maybe in the morning, people trying to get out. If it becomes a cut through, which it will, if it's open, it'll be a cut through. Unless we have a police force right there every morning. I would say traffic will back up down that hill, if you're familiar with the terrain there. It'd just be a mess. And as far as kids, we got a couple bus stops there, a lot of kids, especially in the morning when everybody's in a hurry to get to work. So, I mean, if it gets open, a kid's gonna get hit, I think. And I wouldn't want that on my conscience. And if not a kid, maybe another mailbox, maybe a parked car. It's just a mess. So I really see, I can't come up with a good reason to open it unless an agenda working that I'm not familiar with. But if it's just the aesthetics and it's been closed for 29 years, I don't see why it's gonna get open now. My God.
Anybody else? All right, anybody else didn't fill out a card but would like to speak?
Your permission, Chair, if you are online and would like to speak, will you please use the raise hand feature to do public comment? Any raised hands? No raised hands here. Sure.
Okay. Okay. With that, we're gonna close public comment. And then unless there's an objection, which I doubt, since we've got some guests here in the room, we're just gonna reconfigure the agenda here a little bit. So we're gonna jump ahead to our Turnberry Place Drive at Strecker Road access restriction assessment. We'll bring that up to the top, and then once we get through that one, then we'll just go back to the beginning unless anybody has an issue with that.
Need a motion to do that?
Sure.
I'll make that motion.
All right, Mr. Marshall will make it. Mr. Backert will second it. All those in favor of reconfiguring our agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. So we will move our Turnberry item up to the top. And just for those of you guys in the room, because sometimes this is a little confusing and strange and boring, like when we can't interact with public comment and things like that. So technically, this is what is considered a for information item, which means there is no action that we take in this at all. We're just hearing this information. Obviously, you guys are free to hear the information as well. And we kind of, I guess, go from there. The concept of this, the reason that we're having this conversation right now is as we've gone through this process over the last couple months, there was a request from Mayor Garetano to just bring this back into admin PW to just make sure that we have followed this process correctly. This is kind of one of those things where, you know, the government just works very strangely and somewhat inconveniently, where we have to go through these processes and do these things in different ways. We have to follow Robert's rules and things like that. It's sort of confusing. But I'm not sure if it's gonna be Rick or Tom that's gonna take on the presentation here, but I will say this, as I think I've communicated in a bunch of different emails to a number of you guys. I know Mr. Mabry and Mr. Trottier have also had some conversations, as have some staff people. So to clear up any confusion, this situation is sort of stuck in the middle of two different things. The first part, which is what was referenced earlier back in June, was the city council voted to prohibit any gates or blockages on any road. That's what has been described and was intended to be a more forward-looking thing. you guys, most of us all here live in kind of already developed parts of town. There are other parts of town where developers come in and we get a whole lot of different crazy ways that they want to put in houses and do this and move this thing around, and it takes months and months and endless conversations. So to kind of help make that a little bit more clear cut for everybody, we are prohibiting the use of any blockages or gates or whatever on public streets. That's a citywide thing. When you put something like that in place, you have to look both forwards and backwards and see what's going on. So the next part of that was an assessment of all gates and blockages within the city to understand what's going on. Rick might mention that here in a second, but I think off the top of my head, there was 16 of those, different places, Hidden Valley, Joe's Way, things like that. There is only one, which happens to be Turnberry, on a public road. That is what makes you guys sort of stand out a little bit in this space. And while I think I mentioned this at the last council meeting, and I am appreciative of those residents from Turnberry that went out to help make that intersection look nice a couple months ago, it looks much better than it did. And I appreciate the presentation that was put forth to say, hey, we will do a special assessment to care for this. I am not certain, because I know HOA stuff is kind of, gets confusing and in flux as well. For the length of time that that road has been blocked, the care and maintenance of that intersection has been the responsibility of the Turnberry Homeowners Association. So I'm not sure why there is no money in the budget, or if you need more money, whatever. That's not really what we deal with here. But for 29 years or whatever it has been the responsibility of the residents of Turnberry to care for that location. And well before I was a council member, I was a kid on those streets. The intersection has looked a little rough for a long time. And I know, because I live over in West Glen Farms, we have a great big pond that we pay a bunch of money for. None of our houses look at it. None of our houses touch it. Everybody asks me why we have to take care of it. It's because it is our responsibility. So I completely get it. I've been over that site a lot. I imagine there's like maybe 5 or 6 houses that have like a clear view of that intersection at any given time. So it doesn't really fall into the space of needing to be cared for. But I mean, that is the reality of the scenario. So I can tell you, there is no great agenda to make this a cut through. I don't think, based on having driven through the neighborhood and looked at it, you know, when this was closed, Strecker and Clayton were 2 very different roads. When I was a kid, I ran from Crestview to Lafayette down a 2-lane road that a tractor could barely fit down. It's not what it looks like anymore. So back in the day, for sure, Turnberry was the way to cut through there. My personal opinion, I don't know that people are going to be doing that as much as you guys think. I understand the concern and I empathize with it completely. Again, I live in a neighborhood that has a whole lot of through traffic. West Glen Farms is the main drag through a lot of our city, and it is very, very heavily traveled. So I understand and empathize with your concerns. I have little kids. I get it too. But this is kind of one of those items where one of the messages I've seen a lot in the emails is none of the residents of our neighborhood asked to have this opened. That is very true. Sometimes an unfortunate reality of being a city council member is we have to kind of look out for the greater good of the city, which sometimes makes people upset. There was another issue a couple of years ago up the road from you guys where we had to put an SCOD on a handful of properties to try to make sure that that area was cared for in the larger scheme of things. So I hear the concerns. There is no agenda. This is an idea to treat all public streets in the city in a specific way. And the fact that you guys have a very unique situation is sort of an unfortunate reality of how this works. I can tell you, as a trustee in my HOA and a council member, even when we may disagree on the outcome, I greatly appreciate the energy and effort that all of you are taking to have these conversations. Getting our citizens involved is an important part of this process. And as I have said in a lot of emails, I hope that process can continue to make sure that we do this in a way that makes sense. The logistics of the voting and how all those things work, we can explain here in a minute, and I'll let Tom and Rick talk through this, and if they don't get to it, I'm happy to do it. But this conversation is a long way of me saying, I appreciate you guys coming in. There's not anything that we can do in this room tonight to change this vote. The only way to change the vote would be to go back and rescind an ordinance, which I just don't see the likelihood of that occurring. The next phase, as Mr. Mabry and I'm sure Mr. Trottier have said, As we've stated, this isn't really a programmed, it's called programmed, it's not a programmed thing. There hasn't been a line item put in the budget. There hasn't been a schedule that has been assigned to it. There's still actually a couple steps of the process to technically finish it all the way off. So the process is playing out, but I will tell you, and I know I'm sorry that I'm the one that is kind of bearing this news. These are conversations that have been going on for the better part of 20 years. And the fact that it is the eventual opening of this that has, I think, necessitated a real influx of activity in here is just the way that it is. I wish I had a better answer for you, but I mean, this specific location has been the responsibility of the HOA since the day that it was closed. That is how it was written up. And it is what it is. So with that, Mr. Brown or Mr. Lee, I will let you guys handle our agenda item here, and then we can go from there.
I'll take the first, just to give a status update, but then I'll defer to our traffic engineer just based off the examination of the closed intersection. Really, where this is at now, and just to kind of give the committee an update. The inspection took place back in July, on July 8th. 75 out of 100 was scored. Anything over a 70 is recommended for removal. An action plan was then submitted to the city council on July 14th, 2025. And in that report, pretty much had the gate recommended for, not the gate, but the obstruction recommended for removal. The three things that kind of came up as the council made a motion to find the most equitable and timely way to get this obstruction removed was how much would it actually cost to do something like this, and how could we work that into routine maintenance that's scheduled for the area. The Department of Administration did go back and speak with our Public Works team and found that we do not have general concrete street slab replacement plan for that area in 2026. That said, it's the council wish to get this done quickly. It can be. It was around $33,500. It was a quick estimate, but this would be something that would require a bid package to go out and then go out and get estimates that are a little bit more official than just a written comment and estimate. But the other items that we wanted to look at too, that really kind of bring this back and why we haven't necessarily sent out the report cards, if you will, to the residents within 150 feet, is we'd also like to do a traffic study just to take a look at who are cutting through at this time and what are the speeds that are taking place on that road.
Could you speak up a bit? I'm having really a tough time hearing you.
Yes, of course, sir. So two things here. From the department's perspective, we're trying to do a speed study to understand what the speeds are going through that road currently prior to the removal. So then if it is removed, then at that point, then we can have an after action report to see what the difference really is. So it's one of those instances where if it is removed and when it's removed, it would be able to be observed on both ends of it. The other item to consider is the traffic schedule change. So there are two things we'll have to do. There are currently restrictions on turning in and turning out at that intersection. So that will have to go up for an ordinance. So that is just more of an administrative and logistical item that will need to go on as an ordinance and be approved. The other item is obviously working it into the budget tonight. The Department of Administration, obviously the Department of Public Works, is working on its 2026 fiscal year budget. And if it is the council's wish, right now we do not have anything planned in the Road and Bridge Fund to do routine maintenance in that area. But if it is wished, we can have that added as a special line item within the capital improvement or the Road and Bridge Fund. If not, right now, we do not anticipate any routine maintenance in that area for the next couple of years. But if you want to go into it at all, Mr. Brown, about the status of the actual report itself, but overall, right now, we're trying to plan out when this would actually happen.
The only thing I would maybe add more clarity to is we still have one step to take in that policy that was approved by council, and that is that post-evaluation notice. So we will be sending out letters to the property owners within 150 feet of the barrier location and the HOA, basically formally advising you of the evaluation and the number and the scoring. And that does provide an opportunity for you to provide additional information if you feel it was not available or missed during the evaluation of the location. So it's not intended to be strictly an appeal, but it does provide the opportunity for you all to provide more information if it was not considered during the evaluation by the department. So that would be, I will commit to getting that out by the end of the week. That does provide essentially 30 days for you to get back or to respond to that letter. once it's in your hand. So that next step needs to occur as well.
All right, you guys got anything else? All right, any questions?
I'd like to explain to public safety
Sure.
director and committee that, like many of the other boards appointed by the city, is appointed by the mayor, confirmed by the council. 5 people on the Board of Public Safety, and the city marshal chairs the Public Safety Board. The Public Safety Board has representatives on it from the fire department, from the police department, and from residents who live throughout the city in different areas. So there is an official Board of Public Safety, and it meets every month or every 2 months with an agenda. In that particular case, that's where you're looking at the fire districts for Metro West, Eureka, and Monarch. They all are parts of the city. And so all of this regulation affects all of those as we go forward. So there is an official, and has been for 30 years, a Board of Public Safety. There's just not people sitting in offices here, because they're all volunteers as well. So,
Is there a timing of that meeting?
yeah, the next one's October.
The next one is October. It's there every other month, basically, even months.
Second
Year.
Thursday.
It's published for the.
There is a public comment period as well there, but it's not planned to be on the agenda for the October meeting at this time.
Can I ask you just a question about timing of how things happen? So the report was dated July 11th, and it came out the same day as the agenda for the city meeting, which was on the 14th. And we never got to see that report. And now we're saying we have 30 days to respond to a report that the city's already voted on?
No, so here's how this works. So the way that there's an ordinance and then there's a resolution. The ordinance is what prohibits gates and blockages. And then the resolution is what contains the scoring matrix and how to go through the process of evaluating the existing blockages and stuff. So the way that it is written is the department goes out and does their assessments of the blockages, and then they bring in the report. There's no decision that is made by the council at that time necessarily. So what happens is if an item, in this case, your guys' delineators and stuff, falls below a threshold, that triggers the department to have to go out and see an amount of, like, how much would it cost to remove this blockage? And then they bring that back to the city to say, to the council to say, hey, we've done this assessment. This is the score. That's the city receiving it. That's us kind of picking that up. And then they notify in this case, you guys. And then once you get that notification or the HOA gets it, then you have 30 days to come back and go, well, hey, we think that, these facts are different. This measurement isn't correct, or whatever the case may be. But as Mr. Marshall said, like the Board of Public Safety, there are 3 fire departments that cover the city of Wildwood. It's kind of one of those weird things that we have. And so one of the reasons that this ordinance was put in place in this way is because it's not a good public policy to just grab, no offense, any police officer out in the hallway or firefighter you run in the grocery store and go, hey, do you have a problem with us doing this? And them going like, I don't have a problem with that. And then that is what gets turned back in. So instead of doing that, we did review this. I'm trying to remember the exact month. Maybe it was April or May. No, public safety. I think it was April
March
or
and
May.
April.
Yeah.
April, something like that. At the time, the conversation was about looking at putting a closing gate there. And that is where this conversation came from, because even though you guys don't really use that as an entrance, I'm sure you've all driven down Strecker Road, that backside there. And with the island and the curb and the way it's all set up, according to the fire department and other people, it is a difficult turn. If they needed to get in there, that's a tough thing. So putting in a gate and having that gate have to wait and open and close and everything else creates a much larger scenario. So at that time, the decision was reached by the Board of Public Safety to recommend to the city council to just prohibit any gates or blockages, because we were getting a number of these conversations. It wasn't just you guys. We had one over in Brightleaf. We had one in, I think, in Ashley Grove, which is in Ward 8. So it's been kind of an ongoing process. And so that's kind of how that thing started. But I want to say we have been discussing a gate or something This is my 6th year on the council and this is,
The gate was not our idea.
Yeah, we're-
I understand it wasn't your idea, but here's what I will say. Whether the gate was your guys' idea or not, it was still your responsibility to care for the intersection. And that care was not being taken.
so we're being punished, according to you, because you didn't like the way it looked, even though our snow plower ran into the fence.
No, you're not
We
being,
didn't get it cleaned up quick enough.
you're not
for
being, you're not being punished by me.
Really? You're gonna open that up is what you're gonna do,
Here's what I'm gonna say.
okay?
We have a certain way of speaking in this room, in this meeting. If you'd like to engage in this way, that's not how we do it.
Okay.
So I understand that you guys are heated. I get it. Okay? There are things that happen in my ward, in my neighborhood that the city does that I don't like. It's frustrating. This is an item that isn't directed at you. It accounts for you. Yes, ma'am.
I would just like a quick clarification.
Sure.
You stated that in order for this to not be reopened, an ordinance would have to be overturned. But doesn't an ordinance have to be overturned to open it?
No. It's not closed
An
by
ordinance
ordinance.
was put in place to close it.
Technically, the traffic schedule. would require an ordinance.
The traffic schedule is the ordinance. There wasn't an ordinance for the delineator posts.
So either way, you'd essentially have to do the same thing to keep it open or keep it closed. So I'm just looking for clarification here. You said an ordinance would have to be overturned and that wouldn't happen. Yet you can do the legality of getting it reopened.
So they're both ordinances are sort of two different things. One is like, it used to be 25 miles an hour in your guys' neighborhood and now it is 20, or you can't park on the right-hand side of the road or the left-hand side of the road or whatever it is. These are in our traffic schedule, which are determined by ordinance, but the ordinance, this specific ordinance is about not a specific site, it's a citywide thing. So the blockage of a public street by ordinance is forbidden now based on this ordinance. Your guy's street is currently blocked and it also has, I assume, like a no left-hand and right turn,
That's what it is.
turn thing. But those are, while they are both ordinances, they are kind of
So they're both
functionally
ordinances.
different.
So either way, an ordinance has to be overturned,
No, they're different ordinances. You mind if I?
but it's still an ordinance.
So think about it like this, if the obstruction was removed and that ordinance for the traffic schedule was not changed, anybody that turned in or out of that open intersection would technically be breaking the law. So this would be more of an administrative function to remove the restriction that is currently within our traffic code.
You've provided the clarification that either way, an ordinance has to be overturned. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thinking about what you said versus what Director Brown has said, as far as like the appeal process. It seems that there is no appeal process from what you said and that it will be open. Could you clarify that?
Yeah, so the process is, like, as an example, Bridget, is that right? So in your guys, I'm just not, it is your opinion that this should be scored a 30 versus, or your opinion is it should be scored a 0, whereas the department's opinion was it should be scored a 30. That is an opinion question. You would need to have a verifiable fact as to why. So like, for instance, if in this thing it says, this is a 57-foot span and it's not, it's 26 or whatever it is, that's a verifiable fact, mismeasurement, things like that. That is a reason to go and reevaluate these things. If you just don't like the score, that's an opinion thing. That's not really like a fact-based idea. Does that make sense?
Do they have the facts though?
I'm sorry?
I mean, do they have the facts? I listen to her, read off and say it's 2 horizontal streets, then it could be a cut through and, the facts to me from what I hear aren't matching up. Do we have their facts?
I mean, I'm fairly certain, could be
I'm
wrong.
not certain, are you have,
Here's what I'm gonna tell you.
yes.
This man
Mhm.
is a certified public engineer, right?
Yes.
Rick?
So are all these people back here?
There we go, a licensed professional engineer.
He, okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that the professional engineer has done what is necessary to get the facts. I appreciate that there might be a difference in those facts, but I don't think that that is I mean, here's what I would say. When these notifications go out, you guys are certainly welcome to put in whatever pieces of information you think are
Do we have the
pertinent.
facts? Yeah. You have the facts to show us, or?
He's got the report. He
Yeah,
did
let's
the
have another
report.
report.
So we'll get that. and
Yeah,
we'll
the
be
report will
able-
come with the notification. Yeah.
We'll be able to respond. We will.
Yes, sir.
Just, I want, you know, from our perspective, we're trying to actually go through the appeals process. One of the major things that I feel put us over the 70 is going to be, was the aesthetic, right? If we address the aesthetic and we were able to effectively show the plan, I feel like that would be one of the substantive differences post reassessment that would provoke a reassessment, especially with funding and such. I realize that we're not in a discussion at this point,
Mhm.
but I feel like I would just ask whether or not during that appeals process that would be taken into consideration.
I mean, I would, I'm happy to defer to the department, but I would suggest this, that the aesthetic portion of the assessment holds the lowest value of the assessment. So it's a part of it, but it is a small part of it. There's a lot of other stuff that goes into it. And so while, in my opinion, and I think the opinion of many people, including some of your residents, that wasn't a great looking place. What I would say is, while that certainly didn't help your cause, it's not what created the problem.
But it was worth 50. And again, I'm not trying to make this okay. I feel like it was substantive because it was in the review. And it's assigned
Worth a lot.
and it's assigned a certain amount of points, so we would like to address that along with some other things.
Well, we will. We'll respond to them. Sends it out. I think that's a fair process. I guess I'm just curious what you voted on the 14th. It just was weird for us because it was a forward-looking thing on the 14th or in June.
Right.
In July, this comes out right before the meeting. None of us were here for that July meeting. What was actually voted on that July meeting?
So the only thing that was, the thing that was technically voted on is basically, you know, we accept the report. And then you can look at, like, there are occasions when we will, as the committee will, or the council will, like, recommend something, but we, like, it's not, at that time, we're not voting to open or close it. We're saying the vote that was taken and the motions that were made was to look into opening this in the, I think it was the most expeditious and
Equitable manner.
equitable manner. So that's not saying open it tomorrow or, you know, in like 3 months or whatever it is. That's saying part of the department's job is to go out and look at it. So even in like the $30,000 or whatever that we're talking about, that wasn't a bid that went out or anything. That's kind of a rough estimate of what it is. So it's the idea of saying, we understand and accept the score, which is what we have to do in order to move this to the next phase, which is to notify you guys, and then it comes back. It's just sort of the very laborious process of how this all goes. But that's what that vote was. So in that case, it was, you know, let's open this up as quickly as we can, but there's no definitive time put on any of that. Yes, ma'am.
Can you clarify the process, what happens once we submit our score review?
So, I mean,
It has to be a factual item to really
yeah, so
reconsider, but that,
so you'll,
Yeah.
yeah, so you get,
What happens
What's
if
the-
we present?
yeah, what-
that'll be provided into the record for council consideration, but if the council wishes to remove this, that technically it can be done. It doesn't matter.
yeah,
either
so
way.
I would say, like, this ordinance is created so that so what happens is you guys would say, we have, you know, these 5 arguments, okay? And then the department would look at it and go, okay, well, this one is valid, and so it's going to be, instead of a 30, it's gonna be a 27 or whatever it is. That's not a council issue. It just is a function of the process. So in the event that you guys were to score, I guess, lower than 70, then the conversation might be, Rick might come back to us and say, hey, we've had, the residents have appealed in this fashion. Here's what we found. Their score is now a 68, which means, it kind of becomes a different conversation. But at this moment, because of how, like, as this process goes, it's sort of a moving train. So the ordinances were put into place, the assessment was taken, you will be notified of the assessment, then you have your opportunity to review it, then the department reviews it again. If it doesn't change, I don't think the council will hear about it again, because that process is already taking place. If it does change, then the conversation could become a different conversation, but I don't know what that would be, because we haven't done that yet.
You're gonna get them out by Friday, and the next council meeting is when?
So we have one a month. So so we get them out by Friday, and then I would say, you guys have 30 days. So the September, it would more than likely be the October meeting if it were
Yeah.
coming back around. Yeah. Yes, sir.
For me, just one last thing. I guess I'm kind of confused in that with the Board of Safety, I spoke to some of these people. And I don't know what they're telling you, but
Well,
I'm not lying.
I was on the
I
Board of
wrote it
Public Safety.
down. I spoke to Rich, 2 times I did. I'm not lying. This is what the man said. It
I'm-
is not a cut through. And in addition to that, and this isn't me, okay? Council member Cliff, I brought this up to you. You said, and I quote, "I'd storm through this and get it done as quickly as we can." Now, this isn't Sherman going through Atlanta. We're talking about opening a street up. And you said you didn't say that. Well, don't tell me you didn't. You have to talk to the lady that wrote it, not me. I'm just reiterating the facts. And so I'm getting confused because I'm getting, I talked to the fire marshal, he tells me one thing, now you're telling me something else. I talked to Rick, you tell me one thing, now he's apparently saying something else. And what are we to think? I think that's what we're all saying here.
I will say
as
this.
a Group,
I'm not sure. I wasn't there. I don't know who you talked to or what they told you, but I can tell you this, Mr. Marshall is correct. Myself and Mr. Vanek, I think at the time, although Jim, I'm not sure if you were technically at that meeting, we were on the Board of Public Safety when we discussed these gates. Mr. Marshall is currently on the Board of Public Safety. I think they met.
Yeah, I think it was April. You can go back. It's on YouTube.
Yeah.
Our YouTube page had.
When I talked to the fire marshal, the only thing he said was negative was he said, we would never approve a gate. And I said, what are you talking about? We never even brought it up. And he goes, oh, okay. Well, then everything's okay.
So
And I'm like,
here's what this ordinance is designed to do. And in this case, it affects you guys, but I would say as residents of the city, these ordinances are designed to not have a one-off conversation with some person that makes these decisions happen. This is applied across the city now. This is a global event, so to speak, in the city of Wildwood. So whether it's a new development over here or a connector over that way or whatever it might be, this isn't the idea of going and talking to one person or another person and getting a different answer, or a person being able to put some level of, I don't know what you want to call it, political muscle behind something because they feel really important about it. This is about treating all of the public streets in our city in the same fashion. Yes, ma'am.
So just to clarify, it's been stressed over and over to us that Wildwood wants safe streets.
Hmm.
So we're willing to put this ordinance above safe streets.
What I would say is, while I can empathize with all of you, how many of you lived in this neighborhood before the road was closed? Anybody?
1999.
So the road was closed, right? How many of you lived in this neighborhood before Strecker Road and Clayton Road were redone?
Actually, I was. There was going across Cox Creek, there was an actual 1-lane bridge down there.
Correct.
Oh, yes, I remember it.
Okay, that was super dangerous. That's why people were cutting through Turnberry. I am not a traffic expert. We have studies that need to get done. This is a process that needs to play out. I I get it and I empathize with what you guys are
Sorry,
saying.
just to clarify then. Can somebody explain then the reasoning behind spending $33,000 of taxpayer money to open the road if it's not to be used? If nobody's gonna use it as a cut through,
My guess would be, as it is currently being used, the residents of Turnberry will use it. That's why, yes, they are. That's why the delineator posts weren't there for years.
we presented at the June meeting that, and I don't recall the numbers off the top of my head, but Joe, maybe you do, or Lauren, maybe you do, the percentage of Turnberry residents that wanted the road to remain closed.
I would assume 100% of them want it to remain closed, right? But they still want to use it as they've been using it. That's part of the problem. And I will say this, I appreciate you guys all coming out. I'm looking at our clock. We've got a lot of other issues we got to discuss this evening. So if we have anybody on the committee here that wants to say anything, I'm happy to take one more question. Mr. Mabry?
Yes, Chair Farmer. Numerous times during the emails and conversations that have literally poured in on this issue to both Matt and I. And then I'm hearing repeat references made to it tonight again, that there's discrepancy and contradiction between what I know I've heard remarks made by authorities with all three fire districts. And what we hear repeatedly, the residents recollect they've heard from the fire districts. There are authorities having jurisdiction. There are people that can say one thing and recollect something, and then it's the kid's game of going around the circle and finding out how different it is. So with all that to end, I'd like to request that the staff would confirm or reconfirm what the authorities having jurisdiction for these three fire districts have developed most recently, and then have that available for residents as well as our deliberations.
Sure.
That'd help.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Board of Public Safety meeting from whenever that was, maybe March or May or April, whatever it was, that
That
the conversation.
scoring component is very critical for safety for the entire city. And having multiple directions of potential travel to get to Turnberry subdivision, that's very important as well, whether a unit, an engine comes from Metro West or it comes from Monarch.
Mhm.
And that's a large scoring component, and that needs to be confirmed in order to be valid to everybody's purposes.
Sure,
Thank you.
absolutely. All right,
Yeah, I've been putting my hand up here. It's kind of getting
sure.
worn out. I don't know if all the process works with ordinances. It seems like canceling an ordinance or overturning an ordinance is kind of a big deal. Is there such a thing as grandfather clause, 29 years? Would
No.
seem to me there'd be some room for that.
No, there's no grandfather clauses. That kind of, the concept of grandfathering things in, while in some cases it makes sense, in most cases it just creates like, again, endless kind of looping conversations of like, are we grandfathered in? Are we not? This guy said we were, this guy said we weren't. So as far as I know, I don't know that do we have any grandfather clauses?
Not for that.
Yeah, so while technically it is a concept that exists, it's not something that I know of that the city does.
With Bob's request, is it possible that that topic could be brought up at a safety meeting where they're here and we can hear and we can have a conversation about that, where we all hear together what they say? If it becomes an issue, a topic for that meeting.
Just Joe
I'll be here.
What I've proposed is that we get a report from the authorities of these three fire districts and then make those available to the residents as they will be to the city, and it's still.
It's a rotating
So both parties will get them.
It's really
We don't need to meet about it.
Speaks on it.
I would say this, we can certainly look into it. The way that the Board of Public Safety works is not all three of the fire departments are on it. It's usually just one of them.
You're an advisor.
And they're, yeah, it's
Technically
yeah.
on board.
they're an advisory member of the board, so they don't have a vote.
Well, if they do that, though, we could speak about it at that meeting at least and have.
Yeah, I would say, I would go look at Well, can email you. I would go look at I mean, they talked about it at the April
Yeah.
one. I mean, I understand you guys weren't in the room, but I mean, I don't know that they have any, their motivation is safety. I mean,
Should be.
so I don't know that that changes much. So, okay, so if we have nothing else, you guys are certainly welcome to stick around and hang out for the rest of the event. It's gonna be really exciting.
Appreciate you listening to us.
Absolutely.
Yep.
But we're gonna come back to the beginning, and so we're gonna have our conversation on the unrestricted fund balance comparisons.
Yes, with your permission, Chair.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair Farmer. Wanted to get back to the committee. This was something that was noted as an item or future topic consideration. And also was brought up during the auditor's report and just the annual report of the annual comprehensive financial report to the full city council. Specifically, questions were raised about the fact that the city has quite a large level of reserves. It was reported and is confirmed at the year end of 2024. The city had a reserve fund ratio of 155%. That sounded high to some council members, which then prompted the question, and this has been raised before a little bit more informally, of what is an appropriate fund balance ratio to have based off a percentage of expenditures for the general fund. So that did get the not only the department, but the auditing firm, Reuben Brown, and our finance team in general looking at the question and trying to find some comparisons and also just look at some factors that make Wildwood a little bit more unique. Right now, we have a contingency fund that is pretty much mandated by the state. It's 25% of annual operating expenditures. And currently we have $19,819,394, and our annual operating for 2024 was $12,708,000. That's what gets to that 155%. That 25% contingency is already held, so we have that kind of as an emergency, emergency fund, if you will. But when you get to the national standards, I'm going to go through it kind of one at a time here. When you go to the national standards with the GFOA, which typically governs best of practices when it comes to municipal finance in general, they're usually recommending that you have about 2 months of regular operating expenditures set aside. Typically, that does include in their analysis, that can include cities that have a property tax more so. So that's something that I'll get into, but it's just something to keep in mind. But it equals out to about 16.7% of your annual spend. So that almost serves as best practices from a national perspective. Would be most likely that has to be a floor for any city to operate as. When you get into a little bit, and this was one that was found, but there are others that could be, if we were looking as a city to go get a general obligation bond or something along those lines for financing, that's when how much money you have in your reserve really does kind of come in handy. Having a reserve fund balance equal to about 25 to 35%, you're typically going to get that AA rating. It's from Moody's. But if you have to get a AAA rating, which the city does have currently, at least if we were to go out to get debt, we would be a AAA rated institution, and that is set 35%. So really from a national standard, those are typically what they're going to want to see if it's a city that has to go retrieve debt, but also just in general, best practices, you do not want to go really below that 16% threshold. Where I wanted to kind of dive in a little bit more for Wildwood and kind of makes us a little bit more subject to weird cycles in the economy is that how we're structured just in general. I mean, when you look at this, there's a couple principles that you want to go. If you're going to use an unrestricted fund balance for certain topics, I mean, you could have it as pay-as-you-go capital, which we do typically do it on. Debt reduction, you can have, like a lot of cities that are different than the city of Wildwood would have some type of pension or some kind of obligation that they're stuck with that is, guaranteed money instead of just an investment on a percentage basis like the city of Wildwood does for its employees. But also, economic contingency funds, which that 25% would represent, but actually identifying it as an economic contingency fund. And then also just protecting your operating baseline for, imbalances year over year. But where this kind of gets a little bit more specific to Wildwood is the pay-as-you-go capital would probably be the most specific to Wildwood, just because we do have some pretty large facing it projects that are looking us down at this point. If we were to create a policy that would chip away at that larger reserve fund balance, that would probably be one of the considerations we want to look at, because right now, when it comes to debt, paying down debt, The city had a NID. It doesn't really have too much to do with the city in the first place. We had that being paid off by assessments. That was also redeemed in 2023. So that debt has been cleared. The only other debt that technically the city does not carry, but is at least, I guess, administers, is the Crossings Community Improvement District, which actually serves as its own taxing body. And as of right now, this is something that would be spoken at another SID board meeting, but the debt service fund balance ratio right now for them is looking good enough to pay off the remaining portion of the bonds. So it's gonna have the debt service payment this month and then actually be redeemed in March. So after both of the CCID is done, the city really won't have any ties to any type of general obligation. And these two actually are not directly tied to the city. The NID was a little bit more so, but it was paid from by assessments from those individuals included. So I wanted to talk about that just because we don't necessarily have a big loan that we're trying to pay off, and we're gonna use that money to get down. So then you're pretty much making money from not paying that interest. It's just not the case here. The pension and just your general operating for folks that would be retiring and having to pay them after the retirement, that is not as much of a consideration here in Wildwood as well. We don't have anything like loggers where it's a guaranteed benefit plan. We actually do each year, we have a small staff, obviously, as the council's aware. And we actually have a 401A program that pays into pretty much a retirement program. It's funded each year through the budgeting cycle. So it's not something where we'd have, an unanticipated long-term liability that might pop out on the other end if truly it would be something that would be able to be addressed at the time each year if we were having a serious downturn in the economy. The Economic Contingency Fund, that is something I did want to, the department looked into and did want to mention. Since we have 25% to set aside, it is important. But that said, it's almost asking, and we'll get into it, of what is the appropriate level and how you want to actually spend that. But really where this gets to become more important is how Wildwood is somewhat dependent on not only contractors to do the majority of the work, which means that is subject to market conditions. But also the city of Wildwood is very contingent, its entire revenue structure is contingent on people spending money within St. Louis County. Without that stable property tax that, is the most stable source of revenue that a city or any type of governing entity can rely on. That does create a situation where if we have a large depression, which obviously we don't want to see here in the city or in general, we have a system where folks are no longer buying as many goods or going out to eat and paying any money on sales tax, or if they're, potentially going to be conserving, maybe they're not going to have their air conditioning set to 68. They're going to set it to 75 when times are tough. Right now, it does seem as if, revenues have stayed stable. Over the past couple of years, we've seen a slight uptick. This year, we're actually seeing it kind of curve off and just be stable since last year. It's not really changing too much. That said, if we were to have a turning of a page, if you will, and the market were to crash or something along those lines, the question would be how quickly the city would be able to operate right now for a year and a half, which is great. That would be able to get us to a point where if we needed to go get debt, we would be able to do it in a time which isn't chaotic and would be able to get a pretty nice interest rate based off the rating that we'd be probably locked in at. And not only that, but the city wouldn't necessarily need to immediately put a ballot initiative together where they would be going out to request additional funding. And if it's something that's like something we'll talk about later tonight, the stormwater park sales tax, if we're already seeing a very large drop in the sales tax revenue from our capital improvement sales tax fund or just in general pool tax distribution, those are important considerations because that means most likely people are not going to approve another tax. But also the other topic to be in consideration is that that's not going to make as much money anyways. Eventually it will, but in general, we will have a lot less support. So those are two things to take into account. Right now, we do have another countywide, just to kind of go through this, I think this is good to go through. 47% comes from, this is general fund only. 47% of our general fund is coming from our pool tax program and how we're getting a per capita distribution from St. Louis County. It's that 1% sales tax. 22% is derived from our utility tax revenue, which is actually a large leg that I think goes a little bit underappreciated, if you will. It is something that helps stabilize our general fund. That's coming from electricity, water, and gas, because right now 2023, we voted as a city to reduce the percentage. We used to have a 5% gross receipts on this gas sale, gross, if you, 5% of your service fee that you have with your, with Spire. We actually decided to, when they raised their rates, we would typically just have 5% of that new rate. We decided to lower that to match the equal amount. So we actually decided to stay flat back in 2023. So that does kind of contribute. Right now, we're getting about 4.8286% on gas services. So those are some couple things to keep in mind. The other item that I wanted to bring up is that there is the 18% of our revenue, which comes from the public safety sales tax. That is great. It helps pay down you can't spend it on anything other than public safety initiatives. And quite frankly, a lot of it goes to drive down the costs of our services agreement with the police. So that said, all of those items except the utility tax are dependent on people spending money in St. Louis County. So if there were to be something massively go wrong, let's just say in our economy, we could be put in a situation where we're not ever going to have a spot where we're not getting any revenue from these sources. But so that's something to also keep in mind. It's never going to go to zero unless that would be catastrophic. But we could have some slides where, in COVID, we thought that we were preparing for a little bit of a storm, if you will, with spending, just because folks were not able to go and they were closed down for at least 4 weeks. When we looked at it, that we saw like a hot spot. But then we actually saw, this is just good news on how these market conditions work. After the 4-week closure of all the businesses around town, if you look at that distribution of revenue, you saw it pause. And if that was consistent, that would have been something very scary for the city, but also just its reserves and generally it's the continuity of service. But after the businesses were allowed to reopen again, you actually saw an uptick in almost overcompensating that folks were not able to purchase anything during that time. So just wanted to bring those items up before jumping into how the city of Wildwood does tend to have a pretty large ratio comparatively. It's something that, we don't necessarily need to have 155%, but I don't think we want to be going in a direction where we're just cutting it at the knee. And let's go to the bare minimum of 16.66%, not have a very stable process for utilizing those funds. So more than happy to answer any questions on that component, but wanted to jump in of how we stack up with some of the regional partners. We have in this review, we had St. Peter's, Baldwin, Chesterfield, Kirkwood, Hazelwood, Wentzville, Webster Groves, University City, and Creve Coeur. The only other city that had even a remotely similar reserve fund balance ratio was Creve Coeur, and that was at 113.4%. Just looking at some other cities across Missouri, usually you're sitting at policies around 50, 35, around pretty much 30 to 50%. But that's the policy. It's different than what's actually in the account based off their annual comprehensive financial report. And when you look at this, you'll see that Wildwood has a pretty large unrestricted fund balance, but also with some of these other cities, just them being larger in population, they tend to have a little bit more money in the bank. But someone like Chesterfield, we actually have more money in the bank than Chesterfield does. But Chesterfield's also spending at a higher rate, and they're at about 57.3. So just a heads up on these cities that we looked at, 64% mean, so that's an average, and then the median was about 57 to 61%. So it's typically around 60% is what we've been finding. That is just based off the facts. That's not necessarily what's included in their policy, but that's where we wanted to kind of start from. If we were going to look at how do you spend these funds or how do you create a new threshold, it would almost be, you don't want to be below 60 because that's an average of our partners. And quite frankly, it just would not look too good to go below 60 if everyone else is at 60. So the other component, right now, the department is saying, I think there's a lot more work to be done, but wanted to give this initial report after looking at some of the other cities that are out there. We're usually seeing 155 is a lot higher than pretty much anything I've been able to see, the department's been able to find. So we're looking at it, if we were to do something like this, you would definitely want to be above the median and average across the region. We're looking at having almost a policy that would say, let's set a target at 75 and potentially having a floor at 50, which is well above, well within the median, a little bit below the median, but then having a cap at 100. Maybe that is something we need to do. So it's almost like a Goldilocks zone where we target to have the certain percentage of reserves, but that means we can guarantee to the residents that we're putting money into issues and risks right now that are going to potentially cost more money in the future, versus not having money, it's a tough balance, because we need to have money in the instance, because we are a sales tax based city. We need to have money available if the economy were to take a very rough turn. But at the same time, it can cost you more money in opportunity costs if you don't spend money now, whereas, it does help the city in a sense. We do get around 4% on yield when we're investing in these funds. So it does help to have that padding, but if you don't fix a bridge, let's just use an example. You don't fix a bridge, you don't pave a street. That time, that opportunity cost of not doing that project now will actually eventually come to catch you, because the cost that we're seeing with contractor-based spending now, it is exponentially going up, and the estimates that we have seen, we've seen this in some of our most recent projects. We go out and get an estimate, we pay professionals to do it, and then quite frankly, the market's just not matching up. So that goes to show, if you have projects that are out there sitting, then you would need to maybe potentially think about. It's big enough and it has the full backing of the city council, that maybe we'd want to take a quicker step and put in a process that keeps it at 75 at target, 100% cap, 50% minimum, and then having a policy in place that if you were to go below that 75, what do you do to fill that coffer back up? What are you going to hold out on that next year? And that's something the department's more than happy to engage with, but wanted to have the discussion. Obviously, going from spending 55% would be a monumental task. We would take that lightly. And I don't think this is something where you wanted to start naming projects, but it's something as if we were going to put together a strict criteria for what could potentially meet the city's requirements for where we would spend these, then that's where we'd almost put a gold star on that project and say that would be eligible for this type of funding. Like I said, a lot of discussion still left on this, but wanted to at least get the general highlights to everyone and just kind of explain some background. Thank you.
Alberts.
I'm contradicting what you just said about priorities, but in line with what's coming. Everybody, I don't know, everybody knows Latitude's coming around again. So I think finishing Main Street should be at the top of this list whenever something comes around with priorities, spending some of this money, because we all don't know how Latitude is gonna develop or not develop, and the consequences that may come from that.
Good news, if you don't mind, we do have money set aside, and obviously we'll be discussing this with the capital project too, but capital improvement sales tax fund. We do have money set aside for the construction of Main Street, not burying the utility lines in 2027. I do believe we'd have a lot of work in front of us just for right-of-way acquisition.
Sure.
So right now, this year, we actually had 200,000 set aside for right-of-way acquisition on Main Street. And then next year, we are scheduled to kind of hit pay dirt, if you will. That said, we'll be discussing that later tonight too, but
Right.
we didn't have the easement necessary the right-of-way dedication necessary to really go in there and get started and get the momentum needed. So we'll be talking about it. We do actually have a strip map included in tonight's discussion. And I think that I'm excited, the department's excited to have that conversation.
All right, anybody got anything else on the unrestricted fund balance? Mr. Mabry?
Yes, Mr. Lee, do you know when the last time was that we breached 100% reserves and went from 100% to anything above that figure to get to 155? Has it been a decade that we went from 100% reserves to half again that much? Or has it just been a windfall in the last 3 or 4 years? And even if you don't have an answer, my point is we have zero practice at operating at less than 155% reserve right now. We've got no experience curve of how to behave that way, where all of these cities have had practice and they've found where the weak spots are and the holes to avoid and how they almost got in trouble. We got zero of that brain trust under belt. So in contemplating whether it should be a 16.5 or a 35% or a 70% or a 90% or 100%, I would err to severe caution that we don't get caught and take the city down the tubes because we didn't catch something that a Crestwood experienced in the 70s or something that they learned their mighty expensive lesson from. So I just cut to the quick and say, anybody who discusses anything less than 100% ought to just leave the room.
I don't disagree there, Mr. Mabry, and just a quick note too, the city of Wildwood, we really, kind of added the bulk of that balance throughout the early 2000s, late 1990s. As we have taken on more assets, we have practically gotten to a point where we're breaking even. It's not necessarily making a ton of money. We've actually lost money with the telephone franchise tax, which actually used to be a pretty decent revenue driver, but everyone's cutting the cord on telephone. We do not have any Wayfair legislation. We do not charge on anything that might be purchased out of state here, but through online sales. Typically, when there's a new type of revenue source that we could tap into, the city has rejected it and then postponed it definitely. So that said, I don't think we should just jump down to 100%, like spend 55% of that either. Mr. Mabry, I completely agree with you. The department's more so looking at it from a perspective of if we need to maintain something, we could potentially have a system set up where a project could maybe meet the requirements to receive some of that reserve funding. Does that make sense? Like if it's
It does, as long as it's never, ever in life going to be below 100%.
Yep.
Until we have a decade's worth of experience operating at 100%. Then
Yep.
we can get, I was gonna say something, but we can get bolder.
And I agree. I think if you immediately would just spend that's a lot of money to spend. So I wouldn't want to go out and just do that all at once anyways.
Mr. Mabry.
Quick question, you threw out one figure. I was a year and a half operating. Was that with no,
Literally nothing coming.
nothing coming?
If you turned off all revenue sources for operating, and you would be able to fund the city's current activities with no service discontinuity for a year and a half. And that actually does not include capital improvement sales tax fund, does not include we have money in the TGA as well, but really the road and bridge fund and capital improvement sales tax fund, you almost need to set those aside too, because those are handled independently and must be handled independently per state statute.
Just for scale order magnitude, what's the most on any one single project the city's allowed to spend without, what is it, 3 million too?
It's 3.5 technically, but if you'd use the
And it goes up there.
escalator, it's about 4.2.
I will just say this, I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time. So I am of the opinion that we need to come up with an answer on this sooner rather than later. But I also I know that we have a lot of our unrestricted fund balance has been there from almost the beginning of the founding of the city. And a big chunk of that has been sort of held on the back of deferred maintenance. So there's a number of things, the building that we are sitting in, some other ideas where it was just kind of like previous versions of us sort of like, well, somebody else will figure that out down the road. We don't need to worry about it. So when we talked about the Wayfair tax a couple years ago, I don't like paying taxes as much as everybody else, but when you are looking at how society changes and the fact that most shopping now for a lot of people is done online, we've kind of handicapped the city's ability to grow any revenue stream. So when we're looking at, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, like a parks and stormwater tax, or the frustration that many of us felt about the governor vetoing, pretty insignificant amount of money when we're talking about $20 million. Because we have $20 million sitting in the bank. Like, I think from a financial standpoint, the city has made choices over time that hinder our ability, as you said, to even understand how we should be operating. Like, everyone, I think I'm the only one in the room that was on here when COVID was happening. There was a legitimate panic that like, we're not gonna have another penny come in the door. And that is not what happened. And so while I hope that we don't have another economic crisis of some kind, I doubt very much in any of our lifetimes in this room, we're gonna have another COVID level situation. So I think what we need to do is set a policy that makes sense. I like this idea of kind of a Goldilocks zone, but I do think we need to look very carefully at like items that we haven't spent money on that we need to. I mean, we haven't had one in a while, but the building committee, like, I'm gonna guess that it's $1 million to $2 million easily to get this building back to where it needs to be. And that doesn't include what I think is an important thing as we go through this, you know, outfitting the council chambers with appropriate cameras and microphones so the residents can see what's going on. We did that in here. It works pretty well. Over there, it's a little bit suspect. We have a garage that is gonna come online in a certain way to the city that is also like $1 million in repair are needed. We have a $300,000 fountain. We've got $2 million worth of retention detention basins that we can and should be taking care of. So maybe what might be a good thing is to take a real serious eye on what have been the legitimate, like, deferred expenditures that we have had happen. And also figuring out, you know, a lot of our operating budget, like I'm trying to think back to I feel like it was like the heater or the boiler or something, like we weren't doing appropriate maintenance on some large device, I don't remember what it was, which meant we then got to buy a new one because we weren't paying $500 a year to take care of the old one. That has happened a lot in our city. And so, you know, my personal opinion, I'm all for having a great savings account, but I think 155% of operating expenses is financial mismanagement, just as bad as if we had no money. Especially when it comes to the fact that, like, for years and years, we just ignored very expensive problems. So that would be my suggestion, is like figure out what, you know, the real stuff is, because, you know, $2 million out of the fund to fix this building, well, I don't love the idea. The fact that $2 million should have been spent while this building has existed, sort of like, you don't really have the money in your bank account if you just haven't spent it yet. That's my thoughts. All right, anybody else have anything else? Okay. Moving on, what do we got next? Our municipal management software. You wanna do the whole thing, or do we want?
Yeah, I'll do a quick review of it, through permission share. Just wanted to give a quick update, and costs that came in were a little bit higher than anticipated. The department's still working on going through each one of these vendors' proposals, because it's a little bit different than a typical bid on, you know, a construction project, thing along those lines. We're really looking at, can this company kind of partner with the city to transform our day-to-day operations and streamline, like, you create a custom solution that is applicable to city and also improve upon what we've seen be successful with MyGov, with our current vendor, but kind of take it to the next level and make a very easy to use and very user-friendly both dashboard for residents, for obviously management here, and then also for the council to be able to see what's going on, you know, with code enforcement or complaints, but also talking about, you know, potholes being filled and everything under the sun that we do. We work within GIS right now, doing a lot of that. We've been working to convert a lot of our tasks through that system, but the idea was, can we find a system that ties directly in to GIS and can utilize a system that really has an interface that's super simple for residents to go in and report whatever's going on and then track it very, very quickly. And then share an overview of that data to the council on a monthly basis. Right now, we can do that. It takes a few steps in between and does add some staff time. And just pulling the reports that's gonna come out this Friday, the updated code enforcement reports, we get the data pretty well just through MyGov, then transferring it over to GIS, but to put it in a digestible format, like a dashboard, if you will, for those reports, it takes a lot of creating tables within Excel. So that, trying to take those types of processes out, so we just have a simple, easy dashboard to share with the council, share with the residents, so they can know exactly what's going on at any given time and get notifications along the way. That said, the proposals that came in, we provided a copy of each of them, so you can review them at your leisure. The department does not have a recommendation just yet, because there were quite a few that came in, and they are, you know, upwards of 200 pages in some instances. Not 200, but 130, I think was the tops. And then also, when looking at the initial cost, which is included here, the implementation costs, right now, we're paying a little bit over $30,000 a year for our services with MyGov. If you're looking at the full package that's being provided in some of these other vendors, I mean, it's implementation costs ranging from $25,000 all the way up to, you know, $301,000 just from the startup. And then after that, seeing potentially anywhere between like $30,000 to $100,000 in annual expenses. So it is a massive fee that is a lot larger than was anticipated. So the department's gonna go through it, see if there's any fat that's included in some of these proposals that maybe we should be looking at or considering. But the other component too, that is just important to bring up is that we do have the introduction of AI, and something that has not been included in some of these proposals from a quick review is that they don't necessarily tackle the AI problem. They definitely say that it's coming. It's a new feature. They're gonna be working it in. But none of them actually really take the full model and build something custom. So the only fear the department has is that if we were to onboard for something like this expensive, that we go through the time to actually onboard it, and then all of a sudden there's an AI solution that can do twice as much for the same price or less. Department's available for any questions, but we'll be coming back with some type of recommendation for either some or all of the proposal, or proceeding with MyGov, our current vendor, at the next meeting, or potentially looking at some other solutions if AI can move faster. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. Lee, have you done any shortlisting in terms of proposals that are non-responsive, those that are just deficient of meeting deliverables?
Are any of these non-responsive, you said?
Yeah, like, or any of just bad proposals.
Well, the only one that, I mean, GovPilot, we actually went through a couple different experiments, if you will, the demos that they had, and it seemed like they provided a proposal, but it seemed a little short, and we'll be going through that one a little bit more.
Is that the one that was $100
It's the one that's $0 implementation and 20,000 across the board, and after 5 years, it's about 100K, which is actually, that would be us saving money with,
Yeah, sure would.
with our. But I almost think with this, it's an RFP for a reason. There needs to be a review of not only the cost, but also what services we truly need, and also what's the true history. That was a big question of what is there. I'll go through these really quick. The main things that we were looking for is, do you have experience with similar sized cities like Wildwood? Obviously, are you being used locally as well? That's a big key thing to look at too. But then the other one is really reporting. What's the interface that the resident, but also the manager or whomever is looking at to be able to track some of this stuff? Because right now, that's our biggest issue with MyGov, is that resident reporting side is okay to actually input it. The same goes for polling data. It's a little tedious, but it can be done. It's just adding staff time to really go in there and work out the kinks to be able to make it pretty and present it in a way that's functional. So yeah, right now I don't have anybody that's necessarily ruled out, but yeah, one was a little bit skeptical just based off the lack of the not a very large proposal.
All right, anybody else? Okay, that brings us to our 4 action items. That starts us off with the stormwater and parks tax analysis.
Thank you, Chair. So tonight, this kind of ties in well with the reserve fund balance, but tonight the department wanted to follow up with a request after the governor had announced the decision to line item veto the $250,000 appropriation for watershed erosion mitigation in Wildwood. There was discussion about, whether or not the city is in need of a stormwater parks tax, and also what it would take to actually do one, put it on the ballot. So we have some information here tonight for that specifically, and also how much we can anticipate in revenue from that source, just based off current numbers. One item to keep in mind, though, the department wanted to add this in, that we did recently meet with the governor's staff, and though there was some grace given to the city, and it was already provided to them that we have been putting a large sum of money into MoDOT's roadways. They did take interest when that was brought up, but through and through, it almost seems that the governor's office is not looking at one-off projects or just these independent projects funded by a city, or matched by a city even at 100%. They almost said we're going to pre-COVID levels of project funding throughout the state, which I've found some examples, the department's found some examples of that not being too consistent based off some other cities that have gotten their funding for different projects. That said, it does seem like it will be an uphill climb to get direct funding from the state. Wanted to provide that overview, but right now the department is sending information about how much money we're spending on our state roadways with Route 100 and Route 109, the roundabout project. And the hope is that they will potentially consider assisting the city with a project that we've been sitting on for a couple of years, because they have kind of put us through this intangible loop. A couple things here for stormwater parks tax in general. You can tax as a municipality such as Wildwood, you can tax to 5% of all gross receipt sales. throughout your city. And that would, if the city were to elect to do something like that and then be passed by the voters, that would be an amount equal to our capital improvement sales tax fund. A separate fund would need to be created, just like our capital improvement sales tax fund is today. One important measure that you have to include if the council were to want to consider this, is that in the actual language, you need to include, it's not actually asking for something too specific. It's just saying, are you gonna propose a tax? And what's your percentage of it? So is it 0.25, 0.33? It could be whatever the council agrees to, but also it needs to indicate whether it's for just parks, just stormwater, or both. Those are a couple things. We actually have draft language here. It is a yes or no question. After the council would approve something like this being put on the ballot, there's some very strict case law and making sure the city or its representatives do not actively promote the initiative. So just wanted to bring that up as well. Does have to have a created separate fund. Overall, though, when it comes to actually putting this on, you don't want to have advocacy, the cost for adding it. The best case we don't have an answer from the Board of Elections, but we do have the receipt from the last time we did a ballot initiative. And that was back in 2023 when we had a proposition about some authorizations within the charter. And that was $24,570 for the April election. So it is dependent on what election you put it on because you're paying a prorated amount based off who else is currently putting a ballot question on there, and also just the generalized costs that you got to pay the salaries of the election poll workers, you have to pay for the machine rentals, et cetera. That said, depending on the election, we could see those costs double. I mean, you do have the salaries have increased over the last couple of years, and if there's not many other municipalities that are putting a question on there, it could equal $50,000 if it's a general election in 2026 where you're expecting full voter turnout and they are anticipating those costs accordingly. That said, when it comes to the actual revenue that could be perceived from this tax, right now, we're currently bringing in about $2.8 million annually from the city's 0.5 capital improvement sales tax. So if that was levied, you would see overall a 1% sales tax throughout the city charged on any good or service purchased here. And that would equal roughly about 2.8 million for the city. If it's at 0.5 and at 0.25, which other cities have also done, it'd be about 1.4 that could be spent on both parks and stormwater if that's included in the ballot language. So really, the department is able, as long as the council approves it, able to put ballot language up whenever feasible. It's actually a pretty easy process. It just costs some money to do so. That said, it's more so about educating prior to making that final decision because it's something that the residents are going to consider very closely. Department's available for any questions, but tonight the department was really just looking at any feedback. If we want to keep looking into this, and really, if we are putting together some type of communications plan for getting it on the ballot.
Right, Mr. Rogers.
How do you feel this relates to what we just previously talked about with the with our balance being 155%?
I think it's tough. That's the toughest part about it, is having a 155% unrestricted fund balance for the general fund. I think it's a little different because you can make the argument that for a stormwater parks tax, that is going to be a separate account used to address the maintenance of park facilities or creation of park facilities, and then also tackling an issue, if you can couch it and how it should be, is tackling an issue that we've seen $30 million worth of expenditures being proposed just for one watershed alone, and a $1.5 million proposal for a stormwater master plan, which, I mean, it just seems like the stormwater issue is really the thing that's gonna kind of suck the air out of the room. That said, you almost have to include the parks component because a lot of residents, if you don't live, and this is just thinking out loud on a communication side, if you don't live along a watershed within the city, then you may not be too aware of some of the critical issues that we have. You might not be paying attention to some of the, not everyone has the time to watch the Water Erosion Task Force meetings or checking in on some of the reports that are submitted to the council. That would be the main thing to be communicated to the residents, is how many projects that are already stacked up just from taking a peek at this thing when we haven't even completed our full analysis of every watershed, which we have 9. It's a tough one. That said, I think it would play in, I mean, if residents do want to take a look at it, I mean, it's kind of hard to say, hey, you need more of my money while you're saving so much, while you have so much money saved.
And just as needing are the parks, right? There's no fund for them anywhere, right?
All of that And that's really what kind of, that and our roadways, just we've taken on more roads in town center. That's part of our policy is that when roads are built, we want to take them on, especially in the town center. And then for parks, we've built a few in the last couple of years. Community park is not cheap to maintain.
Right.
The Village Green is going to be adding expense, which we'll be able to couch into our current operating model, but it will come a time where our contractor base is just gonna, we're gonna have to make cuts elsewhere if we want to make sure that we're cutting grass. It's not tomorrow, but it is in the future. So it would be helpful to have a dedicated fund specifically for parks, and that could be inclusive of park staff or just parks individuals that would be supporting that feature as well.
Maybe the taxes after we spend some of the discretionary money, so.
That's the tough thing. I will
Mr.
say.
Albert, just stole my thumb. You're happy with yourself.
I'm just trying to keep this meeting going,
There we
Bob.
go.
Evil minds think alike.
Anybody else?
Until the city puts skin in the game. We've got no legitimate right going and asking for handouts from the residents with a tax.
Right.
We've got to show that we're committing discretionary funds first and foremost to the highest critical priorities and communicate that to the city. And hey, folks, this is the most important thing in town. We've spent all the money we can on it. Now we got to come begging. We weren't before, not for the year and a half before or whatever it's going to be to put the ballot on.
Right.
But I just thought is that as the strongest conviction, and residents say, well, if you want this money, go spend all that money you got laying around doing nothing.
Anybody else?
We need to vote on anything tonight?
Well, it would be nice to get, the department had presented, kind of a next step would be to, and honestly, the department, after putting together that questionnaire with the EDC, it was almost like that would be a good place maybe to tie this in, but ask a specific, like, would you be willing? I know it already kind of
Yeah.
addressed it, but maybe add in one or two very specific questions to that survey, because it's already getting a pretty in-depth understanding of, hey, we have these assets, we have to maintain them. I think it helps at least start getting the information out there and should give us an understanding, a rough understanding.
I think that's a good idea. I mean, as having spent a long time with this watershed thing, I am and have been for a long time. I think what we're doing right now, even just tonight, is a great start. We need to get to this point, while our city has functioned in a really conservative way financially, I just don't know that it's been a particularly appropriate usage of our funds. So getting our reserve fund balance figured out and taking care of some of these long gestating projects, I think is a good thing. Getting our budget, our capital improvement budget figured out and either, eliminating or whatever we want to call it, these projects that have been around for a long time that really clearly are not that important is another thing where we can then say to the residents, hey, we've gone through our whole process here. We've looked at our budget. We've taken care of these backdated items. And now let's talk about what we need to do from the stormwater situation and the park situation. I think they need to be together because, our city has 9 gigantic watersheds, which is good. And we've got more parks than we know what to do with, and people would like more of them. So we have to figure out a way to pay for all that stuff. But I think what we can do maybe, I personally don't think that this next election cycle, that doesn't make any sense to do that now. But I think if we can, go to the residents and use time to figure out look, we've moved all these pieces in the right direction and now we're asking for the right thing, I think that's an appropriate move. And whether that's in 2027 or I would say even in 2028, depending on how we got to get that figured out, we should probably do that. But I think asking questions of residents, to gauge their understanding of the problem. I don't know that, I'm pretty certain, because I saw it happen with watershed, when that started, nobody knew what the watershed was. Now people stop me and ask. I think people understand we have a lot of parks. I don't think they have any concept that we don't have any real way of paying for them. So that level of education takes time, but I think Mr. Mabry and Mr. Albers are correct. We as a elective body and as a city need to do a better job of managing the money that we have in our hands right now and getting that so that we can say, hey, our reserve fund is 75% because we took care of all these things and that's what we're doing. And then our budget is set at this range because this is what this means. If anything scores above or below a 670 or whatever number we're picking, forget it. That kind of a thing. I think we're doing the right stuff. I just think it needs to come here incrementally, but I don't know how it works, if we can future date putting something on a ballot that far out, but
No,
um,
that would be something we'd bring back, but if the committee thinks that, hey, this issue's been adequately explored and we should table it for now, then
yeah, I
in
mean,
that case, we.
50 grand sounds about the right number to me. And
Yeah.
I think what we have learned is that all looks great. We've got some other things we've got to take care of, and so now we have it and we understand it.
Yep.
That would be my suggestion. So I don't know what kind of action, you just want a motion to say we accept and understand the policy?
Yeah, that would be,
We'll put a
that'd be
little
fine.
pause on it? All
Yeah,
right.
that'd be great.
Mr. Backer will make that. Anybody care to second it? Mr. Alvarez will second the motion to appreciate and table the stormwater and park sales tax conversation for the time being. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay.
Chris Mouth eye.
Oh,
Alright.
Chris not die. Perfect.
was a
Um, that brings us to our priority ranking of capital improvements.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And this is, and I do apologize, this was supposed to be attached earlier in the, it hasn't changed at all too much from last month, but what we did do is incorporate some recommended changes from the committee. If you go to the website now, you'll see that there are the tier ones highlighted in green with the anticipated expenditures for fiscal year 2026 outlined with expected grant funding next to it. The mid-tier, tier two, listed in somewhat of a, didn't print as well, but like a minor yellow. And then the tier three projects listed in red. This is just based off going through the criteria that's included as well. One by one, I know it kind of looks confusing when you look at all the numbers stacked up against each other, but really we flipped as recommended. The first criterion that has the 18, which is weighted at 18 times. So when you see the 9 in the box there and you see an 18 in that first row, what that actually means is that 9 is multiplied by that 18. So that helps by not only taking the criterion ranking itself and weighting it as master plan is most important, or if we want to change it around, that's fine too. If risk mitigation is want to be number one, or public safety, that can be added or changed to fit the council's needs. But the other side of it is the actual weight of the criteria itself. So it's somewhat weighted in the sense it's 0, it's a 3, it's a 5, or a 9. And how that does it is go through these one at a time. But really answering the questions, each one, is it included in the master plan? You know, and it's listed as a major priority. It is furthering the goals, objectives of multiple goals within the elements within the city's master plan. Obviously, that's going to be one that's clearly a 9, but if it's one that is, you know, not mentioned at all, it's something that's been brought up by a resident or two, that's going to be something that's not going to score too highly since it hasn't had that type of consideration. The same can be said for the cost of the project. The department did establish this. We changed it up a little bit for how we weighted these. We took the 2.875 million that the city anticipates from revenue from the capital improvement sales tax fund in and of itself. And we took the cost of the project and we put that at pretty high. I mean, we had it ranked at a 16, which is the third highest ranked priority. But then we actually linked it out that you would get 9%. I mean, you would get 9 points on that and then multiply it out if we could effectively accomplish this project for less than 5% of the annual operating revenue. So that almost says, hey, if it's a quick one and done project, obviously there's going to be 17 other criteria that have to be weighted, but it almost kind of takes those bigger projects and makes them have to score higher in other departments versus if they're over that 25% threshold. Because if you're spending 25% of your capital improvement revenue on one project, then it should be like one of the major priorities listed by not only the city council, but pretty much should be on the banner of the city for that year. Which we have a couple that met that, which include the watershed erosion task force projects, which include the basins. We did increase that a little bit to 500K. That could be altered a little bit further, but just trying to keep in mind that even with tier one, we were stacking up pretty high. I did put some asterisks on a few of these with the Route 109 BA roundabout project. We actually approved that this year, so that will most likely be carried over for the 2025 budget, and that has been budgeted for this year as well. There may be some that is paid out on 2026, but I wanted to call it out just because it's a project that was just recently discussed, and since it's a major priority for the city and obviously was approved by the council, wanted to not leave it out of the discussion. Something else that was brought up was just so the money was understood that it was still existed was the internet project phase 2, 1.348 million. That was after you take into account a full expenditure for the rebate program. That is what would be left within the capital improvement sales tax fund. That said, we actually are waiting. We should be getting an update from this BEAD program soon. We were actually told by the end of August, so they haven't updated it, but they're actually supposed to be announcing award recipients for the first round. So there could be some good news coming our way there. So that could free up some additional dollars. So just wanted to put some asterisks next to those two projects, just based off the fact that those may have some changes coming up depending on external news, but also through what we've already budgeted in 2025.
All right, anybody have any questions? I just have one, and I don't know if you know the answer off the top of your head. If, let's say hypothetically, something had a perfect score, what would that be?
What would be it would be, none did have a perfect story.
Well, obviously, but yeah, but I'm just saying, like, cause I mean, we have two that are at 1,119. But I'm just trying to,
I can get that bug in there.
I mean, I will say, having done this now for a couple of years, like this, I think is the best way we've done this for sure. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it should really clarify things for a lot of people. I think maybe the next conversation, and I don't know that it's, I mean, I'm happy to have it in here if you think that that's the best thing, but like, I think once we understand like a pretty clear threshold, so I mean, I don't know if it's just happens to be this way, but like, it looks like something north of 750 falls into a green level. I don't know if there's like a breakdown
We
for
could
that.
bring that bridge up a little bit, but
Um,
there is.
But the idea being like, I think, I know it would help me to be like, this is our set of green projects and this is how much money we have. And so if we have more money than that, then we can very easily go into the next set of them.
Mhm.
And then some of these other ones, you know, like we were just talking about, like this, I just keep picking on the pickleball thing, but like $500,000 for something that scored a 292 should never even be part of a conversation we're having.
Yep, and that's where, I think in the red, I think we're, at least from the department's perspective, and more than happy to discuss, but the department's recommending the projects in red to be removed.
Yeah, I would remove them. I mean, I'm not trying to pick on anything. I would almost have a threshold and this would break down in terms of like, you know, what's the perfect score versus not. So, I mean, whatever the number is, if it's, you know, anything, if something falls below 650 or whatever, like probably that's not a thing that's gonna be happening and we can move that down or off or however that works. But I think if you don't thin this out, you know, this stuff just sits there and it's confusing. And when we're talking to residents about whether it's a stormwater tax or these other things, like, you know, like I'm looking at this watershed erosion project, I think $500,000 for some level of maintenance makes sense. But if we're talking about the retention detention basins, if we don't spend $2 million and do it right, there's no point in doing it. So it's a waste of $500,000. That's how I would maybe approach this. So I think just giving us like these thresholds of like, hey, if it, like we did with the Turnberry thing, like if it's at or below a number,
We can,
the answer is no.
we could definitely.
Put them in
remove that.
buckets.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. Yeah, it's not a problem. It's more so we do have, so I guess that would be tying into the unrestricted fund balance policy too. I mean, there is some,
I think they're gonna work, I really do think they're gonna work hand in hand. Like, you know, the stuff you had, like $300,000 for city hall investment. Again, I mean, this is gonna be easily $1 million.
that was more so thinking, for that one, that's a little bit more specific, is that how much can we really get done? And mostly likely it's gonna turn into, for a 5-year, you're gonna see that long-term expenditure, but it's almost that 300,000 would probably cover the engineering and potentially getting started on a few of the.
Sure, so we get started, but then if we move to the unrestricted fund,
Yep,
then it's like, okay, we've got the ball rolling here. Now we move here, this $300,000, which in theory could be a annual line item, is now off of this budget.
Yep.
That would be my thought on that. Okay,
Is
what's,
there
yes, sir.
still a provision for, I mean, last time around, there was an unfunded projects.
that's the idea. I guess that right now, the unfunded project list would be anything in light yellow and red. And
Yeah,
only
like
green
whatever the
project.
threshold is, it just.
It's 750 currently, but the department will come back with that percentage of the total. The idea though is to kind of trim it out a little bit, and then if the council would like, I mean, this is not final. The council can make recommendations as they see fit, and if they want to, the idea here today is to provide, you know, hey, we've made some changes to the actual matrix itself and the process behind it, how it's organized. We'll go ahead and maybe even make it just here's what's included, have that as an attachment, here's what's not, and it's an unfunded needs list. That said, that's gonna be a recommendation. The council could go back and just say, hey, we're adopting the 5-year as it was presented. That said, you know, the department's not recommending that.
I guess the only, concern is, you guys had that meeting with Paige and talking about, a little bit about Old State and stuff. And, yeah, I mean, if something is to be added, if they were to come up with their portion.
But like, I would say with something like that, to me, with something like that, that's an unreserved, I mean, if they came and said, hey, we got $500,000.
I mean, just
has
because you're not
$500,000.
on the list.
Yeah,
Doesn't.
no,
This
but-
isn't written in
no,
stone.
because to me, that's an item that is like, I mean,
Yeah,
that
I get it.
scores very high across the board. So those things where it takes different partners to do something, like having it sit on our budget forever isn't helping anybody.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that.
Well, that said, I mean,
Would be not excluded from consideration because, hey,
in
it's not on the list.
theory, this would be more so for our capital like improvement project planning for each year and then how we incorporate it into our 5-year. It'd be kind of an annual review, utilizing this system, allowing the council to, add in if they want a blank copy on the Excel doc and fill it out themselves. That would be more than appreciated. We can definitely provide that. I'd even include it in the actual report itself. The idea would be though that, I mean, at the end of the day, if they were to come up with that money and the council supported it, they could approve you all could approve an ordinance tomorrow.
I think we already did.
Yeah, but that was, you would still need an ordinance approving the agreement.
No, I know, but I mean, I thought we had a thing that was like, if these other groups get on board.
Was that with the tip?
What's it now?
Do you remember, Rick, did we approve?
I thought we had a thing like a bunch of years ago where like, if all of a sudden Ellisville and St. Louis County came up with money, we would allot money to Old State Road.
I think that was through a tip app and then we did.
We agreed to submit a tip application with that framework in place, so we didn't get funded. That was 3 or 4 years ago.
But I mean, I don't know. I mean, so if we do that, I guess my question is, since we did that and we didn't get the funding, does that then go away or does that
Oh,
idea still exist?
The idea exists, but that would need to be reappropriated by the council.
Yeah, but then you guys would go, hey, we did this 4 years ago and we approved it and here's.
That
what it is.
is honestly, that would be used in the report as a basis for, hey, they've come back. The federal government.
Also,
will
they've got
back,
money now.
They've got money
Yeah.
and we offered this before, and they're now requesting this. The difference is null.
Yeah,
And
or
it
it's been
does
4
help.
years, here's how much more. it
It
costs.
will help, I guess, more so from, obviously, we could have it go through this process too, so we at least have a score to associate with it. But I think more importantly, there was a full council that endorsed it and then endorsed the participation in a
I would think, and it doesn't have to be maybe for this budget cycle, but it might make sense. I don't know how many, I mean, that's a specific kind of a thing, but like, I don't know how many projects are similar to that. But maybe we have a matrix like this that's just saying, hey, these types of projects that require multiple entities to be involved, then, this is how this scores. That could have maybe helped some of the like J-turn and the other roundabout conversations we've had. Not that we wouldn't have done them, but it's just like, this is where these rank on this list.
Yep, we do account, at least in the matrix, we do account for this in 2 different criterion. One, under city-owned infrastructure improvement, you score higher if the city is making an improvement and it's kind of in the mid, it's ranked 9th criterion, so 9 times whatever their score is. But if, say you're doing the Main Street extension, that is extending, city-owned infrastructure to connecting to city-owned infrastructure, that is only benefiting the city. But if it was something that, the roundabout, you look at here on the roundabout 109 BA, it's not gonna score highly. It actually got a 0
Right.
on that because it's not our infrastructure. We're improving someone else's. So that accounts for it there. We can have a separate list though too, where
Yeah.
it says here are the ones that are tied directly to it. The other one would be the legal requirements. So that's asking really, a project that, did not score highly with the legal requirements taking into account, something like Etherton, the Etherton road improvements. And we have 24, 24 easements we would need on that project.
Oh, probably about that, yeah.
So, 24 individuals that have, we just went through this with the process for another project, and it was very difficult to overcome, some folks that just don't want to give up an access to an easement. So where this comes in is that with 24 folks, it adds a lot of different decision makers, and it just, those types of factors can really, take up staff time first and foremost, but also can get us tied up into, other situations where we don't necessarily we wanna avoid it. So maybe it's a place where right away gets acquired first, and then we can take care of the project. I don't know, that's an idea that we've been kicking around here, but
Yeah,
really,
I think
right of
that's a
way
good idea.
acquisition is tough.
So, okay, so what is it you need on this from us tonight?
Right now, we'll go back and get the total numbers for the committee, but next month we'll be bringing back the 5-year and the 1 year for 2026, and we'll have it broken out. Here are the ones that are being recommended for the budget. Here is the unfunded project list. It's gonna look different than what was provided last year.
Great.
And it's gonna have some cut at the knees. Some council members, I think, are going to not be thrilled with that, so just bringing it up, making sure that everyone's temperature is gauged here.
I mean, I think that there will be people that are unhappy, but I do think it's important, if we put a process in place, I get it. I mean, there's plenty of the things in my ward that are currently yellow. That's just,
And like I said, the department,
so to speak.
for any council members that would like to, I do have a copy of the raw Excel file that has the equations built in, so if anybody wants to go through the 2026 version or the 5-year. And if they want to provide that directly back to me, I'm more than happy to provide it to them and get feedback either on the criterion itself or just the process, if anything, I would
So
more
I might
work together on it.
suggest that we take a page out of the Turnberry thing that we did and not necessarily make it like an appeals process, but whatever, if I want to argue about the anniversary park resurfacing parking lot and the drive aisle, like I gotta make an actual argument about it. It's not just like,
I want it
but
back.
I want it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like, let's
yeah.
put something in place where people actually have to put real work into doing this.
Like a challenge. So in that case, would it be that if you're not, if the project isn't currently included on that threshold, which we'll come back with, that
Well, I mean, I would think it's similar, like, so we take down
you
these
would have to challenge
categories.
the number.
And it's like, okay, a master, like I would just ask, so some of these master plan, you've got. The watershed erosion task force is a 9, the Route 109 BA is a 5. Obviously, structurally, those are different projects, but what makes one a 9 and one a 5?
So for one, the element of the first element is environmental control. So that clearly includes responsible development that's taking into account our watersheds, but also just controlling for it. It is clearly indicated in the master plan. It's the most recent update in 2016 began the process for, hey, we need to explore this. This is a big issue. So that was one where the 5 comes in, is that the master plan also, it definitely supports improving public safety. I mean,
A little vague as to what that means.
it is a little vague to what that means, and also you can almost tie in that there's some components of the master plan that say, hey, we need to be focused in on Wildwood's infrastructure, which also ties in where it's.
So I would just say whatever, and there's only a handful of us in here, but if people have a concern about an item,
Challenge the actual score itself.
challenge the score, not I just want it. Or it's been here for 15 years and so it should stay there. Like, it's gotta be a real thing.
It's not a bad move. We can definitely have like a form or something like that put together with it.
Right, okay, great. You want this back on, which part of this do you think is not right? And it shouldn't be, as we're doing with this other thing, it shouldn't be, well, I just don't like it. Okay, so you need a motion or are you good?
If we could get a motion just saying, hey, to affirm that this is kind of the setup that we'll produce for the 2026 budget, we're gonna also be including 2025, so we wanted to get at least the template down correctly, so that when we come back and actually start putting together the final budget, not final, but the proposed budget, that it has the process in place, and if this process is clean, we'll bring this to planning and parks too, just so they're informed,
great.
but overall, this would be the step we would take for capital improvement sales tax fund moving forward.
All right, made by Mr. Backer, seconded by Mr. Mabry. All those what's that?
Comment.
Yes, sir.
Do we need an extra new column that says vetted by and then tally up all the different entities that have vetted it so that it
Well, it's you.
provides for.
Yeah, I'm the, at least from the department's perspective, it's coming from me mostly, but it's also with the input from our directors.
Oh, so if it's got vetted by T. Lee, then it's a pass.
Well, it could be, that's why I'm saying, I'm trying to get everyone to.
So it's, the idea is like he's taken in Rick's and Joe's, and then he, as the administrator, goes, Okay, you got a 7, you got a 9, I'm going with an 8, or I'm going with a 10, or whatever it is.
Okay, now I understand.
That's the idea of it.
That's
but-
why we pay them the big bucks, you know?
But that said, if a council member specifically wants to provide their direct input on any of these scores, they can obviously challenge them independently. But the other thing would be more than happy to provide, an Excel doc of this blanked out without any colors or any indicators, and you could go through just 1 or 5, whatever. And we're happy, we could then, I'll talk with the directors and we can see, we'll include it in the report, but also incorporate that in the final tally.
I would ask on specific items, don't give them the whole
Yeah,
spreadsheet.
yeah, that's specific projects. That's,
Don't give them the whole thing.
yeah, it's a lot.
Anybody else?
It is a tedious process.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Amy, you good on the motion? Excellent. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Up next, I think we're going to Public Works. How about that? Rick, let's hear about some updates on MoDOT and city projects.
Thank you, Chair. Committee members provided a update again this month to you of current MoDOT and city projects that are underway or wrapped up already. We've had a busy summer, as you know. We wrapped up construction by and large on the Manchester Taylor resurfacing and signal project. Probably some final restoration to be done there, but by and large, that project has been completed. MoDOT's making good progress on Route 100 and Route 109. Been out working quite a bit on resurfacing 100 more recently, so that progress is moving forward. We did complete our Centaur Bridge rehabilitation project that got wrapped up actually early. So we got that reopened in July, I believe, or August. MoDOT wrapped up their 109 Route CC roundabout project, and I guess had a ribbon cutting on that last week as well. So if there's any particular questions you have regarding any of the projects on the list, I'd be glad to address them at this point. We did get notice, I should remark to you that we did get notice from MoDOT last week, finally, that we have authorization to bid our Old State Road Shared Use Path project. So that was some good news. We've been pushing really hard to get that through MoDOT. And so hopefully we will get the bid out on the street in the coming week or two and open bids in early October. That's the thing for Old State Road Shared Use Path.
All right.
Based upon early October. When would construction?
I think at this point, we anticipate seeing really much construction until next year. So coming out of the winter, maybe some work potentially during late winter. But most of the hard construction next year.
All right, anybody have anything else? I would just mention, and this is more of a communications thing, they changed the timing at 100 at West Glen Farms and then Old Manchester and Pierside. And the timing seems to work significantly better than it did, but it is definitely very different than it was. So we might want to just put out a post to maybe pay a little bit of extra attention, because everybody's used to getting ready to hop on the gas going straight as soon as that arrow goes, and that is not how it works anymore. We did. Cool. Okay, up next, Main Street Extension Project.
Sorry.
Let me start off on this one.
Yeah, sure can.
Committee member Chair Farmer, this next item I think is on the agenda for information as well. If I'm correct.
Yep.
Provide you an update, and I think it's important that this committee be aware of this project and where we're at with our process and progress. Especially in light of the fact that North Latitude 38 development is going to be back in front of Planning and Zoning Commission and then presumably the City Council soon. We have been working on improvement plans for the extension of Main Street, essentially the incorporation of Crestview Drive as Main Street between Etherton Road and City Hall effectively. We have hired and City Council authorized Civil Design Incorporated to do that engineering for us, and they have started on that work and have developed a preliminary plan and a concept, working with the Department of Planning and Parks as well. And so we provided that preliminary plan to you tonight for any comment or feedback primarily. That's provided in my memorandum and it's shown on the display in front of you. Essentially, the plan that was being proposed mimics Main Street west of Etherton Road. It would be a divided road with a median in the middle. What we have tried to do is to widen the median, so it's in greater width than west of Etherton Road. And the idea was to provide access to the property south and frankly, potentially to the north in the future if redevelopment occurred, with a wider opening there. So the wider median allows U-turn capabilities, which is important for the driveways and for the park as well. So folks, if they wanted to access the park coming from Taylor Road, they could drive past it, make a U-turn and come back potentially, use the on-street parking spaces or even turn back into the City Hall parking lot. So that's why we've widened it out, is to try to allow the ability for larger vehicles to make that U-turn maneuver. Otherwise, you really can't make the U-turn and you'd have to find your way to make a U-turn in the residential streets beyond. So the next steps, we're trying to finalize the stormwater design with MSD. We have some final decisions to be made relative to utility adjustments. I think this plan envisions that at least at this point in time, we wouldn't underground the Ameren overhead power lines on the north. They would probably require relocation of the poles. Presumably in the future with residential redevelopment, that could be considered at that point in time. But with this plan, it likely would not, because that's a very expensive proposition. The cost, I think the most recent cost we had was over $3 million for this project. I have asked Civil Design to update their cost estimate for us so that we have a number for budgeting purposes or a budget number. So they're working on that, should have it to us next week. And then the next step that they're working on is right-of-way plans, which is the next piece of the puzzle to get completed. The right-of-way plans essentially delineate how much easement right-of-way we need to construct the project. Allows us to take the next step of hiring a right-of-way negotiator to put together the easement acquisition documents from those plans, appraise the easements for potential compensation for those property owners, and then put offers in the mail to them. So we could conceivably be in position to start that process by the end of the year, early next year. And I guess that would be our plan to do that moving forward. We do have money in the budget this year for right-of-way acquisition. And then next year potentially to continue with right-of-way acquisition or even move into utility relocation work. So with that, I'll turn it over. Tom, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, just wanted to add a little bit here, just kind of taking into account what the city needs easement wise. We got 7 properties in the northern bend here. Where this is stretching in, we have a property line right here. This is where Crestview is, this small strip right here. We need rights to Crestview from every adjacent parcel owner. So that's 7 plus the individual that owns this stake and then the city, obviously. So that's 8 total. That is contingent currently on the development proposal that's coming back. We won't get too far into that. That'll go through the traditional process. That said, we do need about 37 feet of right of way from the southern bend to be able to build the right Main Street. On the northern bend, wasn't it about 15 feet that we're estimating is the furthest cut in to build this version?
That sounds about right, yeah.
So about 15 feet, and this will be 15 feet of the city moving in on the property. They will also need to dedicate their rights Crestview Drive as well, which is currently in a pretty large state of disrepair. But the other thing is twofold. We will have, what's currently proposed is that we will have a larger sidewalk on the northern end and a little bit of a shorter sidewalk on the southern bend. That said, what was provided in the previous proposal for the Latitude N38 development was doing, you can almost stretch it into this area here and going just up to here and just building one flat piece of concrete, 24 feet in width, and then having Crestview connected here, which would create, and I'll let Rick add any issues here, but a 5-legged intersection, which can cause some traffic concerns. So that's what we're trying. The department's perspective, and I think the Department of Public Works would agree, if we're going to do Main Street, I think we should do it. And the department believes we should do it the right way. And that does include right-of-way dedication on the northern end. But I do think that after some discussions with some of the residents on that side, which we did meet with approximately 5 of the 7, some had really shown interest in the fact that their frontage would be improved. They're having direct access to the new park, and that, quite frankly, they'd be a pretty large improvement. I think that a lot of folks are seeing the benefits from it. There are a couple residents that live on Crestview that are not supportive of it. So just a heads up for what's to come.
All right, Mr. Mabry.
Yes. Rick, only if you can answer 30 seconds or less. Why are there what look like absence of curb cuts at numerous of the properties that are adjacent on both north and south?
The plan that we have should provide access to all the existing properties and homes, and not aware that we,
I think he's talking about these 2 at the bottom.
yeah.
Well, every place I see a concrete driveway hitting the road there and there's no curb cut, I'm wondering why not. That's one right there where
That's
the
your
arrow was. That's just
And
one.
there's one more to the right.
That, I don't know why that's stretched out either.
There's no one next to it. And the one over on the left up against Otherton.
I'll have to double check on that. I'm not clear. I'll have to check on that. I'm not clear why that's not shown, to be quite honest.
There's no curb cut for that, and that's just a little tiny, nothing garage, but I don't see anything else in the form of a driveway that's fronting Otherton. It's just a question, just nosy.
All right, anybody else?
The 3.2 million, is it all city money? No. Access to any money anywhere else, developers?
The idea would be, and that would be something that would be brought up, would be that what can the developer cover on the frontage? But that said, they are dedicating 37 feet of right of way. And that development has not been approved, so that could be part of the discussion. Obviously, frontage for the development is key. I mean, if they build something along their frontage, they're admit that they don't have to, but it is frontage for that development. So
And I think
improvements must be made.
I think too, it's important to, we ran into this a little bit sort of the first time around with the N38 development, where like it seemed like we kind of conflated a couple different things. Like they really kind of, in my opinion, I think they should be 2 separate things. We should be talking about a development and we should be talking about the road, because the, like, in my mind, if we're ceding responsibility, we probably give up an awful lot of control of how that's gonna be. And then it just becomes like a weird football that everybody's kicking around for some reason. That's just me. I had one thing, I'm just curious. Why do we have a thicker sidewalk on the other side of the road than the side with the park?
So it's consistent with Main Street west of Etherton. We have a 10-foot wide
Right.
shared use path on the north side, and that's what that is.
So it's gonna be it's more of a path than a sidewalk, but then the sidewalk on Village Green side is just like a regular sidewalk like we have out front here.
Isn't it consistent with the west side?
It's
Yeah.
consistent.
So it's
with
literally
the
just
side.
taking-
There's a regular sidewalk on the west.
I'm just thinking we might, hopefully we'll have a lot of people walking on that sidewalk, so we wanna probably make sure that we've got enough space for everybody. All right, anything else?
Looks good.
Okay.
No gates,
No gates.
Yeah.
remember?
Yeah. I would also just maybe, I mean, I'm sure, I think I counted, I don't know if this is exactly the scale, I think I counted 20 parallel parking spots in front of the park.
Yeah, and just as a heads up to everyone too, this pretty much from here to the right, we're gonna have to, as we get further into the engineering, I'll let Rick speak to it. This is where the playground's going in now, so they're gonna have to incorporate that. There's gonna have to be stormwater issue.
Well, I think you would want some level of handicap parking in there.
Yep, exactly. So all of this was finalized, of this version was gonna finalize before we had, firm approval from the council to start engineering playground in that space, which one of the main issues we're gonna be using this to address is ADA accessibility for that playground. Because currently, the way it's configured, if we were to build a playground here, we need to be able to make sure it's.
It's not a big, that first entrance to Latitude is probably not gonna happen there either.
So that's gonna be up to the discussions for that proposal, but that is currently.
Right.
Just
But
a heads up, but the idea was, and this was originally proposed
Right.
with McBride's development up on the north side too. But the whole idea is you wanna have, well, Rick, I'll let you, the traffic engineer, explain
Yeah.
this, but you don't want to have folks turning onto the road here because you're right next to the other intersection. And the other reason is the traffic, and this is, Rick brought this up, but a key configuration is that you got someone coming down this way. You know, they're gonna want to park here. They need to be able to turn around, and if they have it down, I mean, you just really can't build it in over there to have a turnaround. I mean, you could, I guess, but it would not be.
The median width isn't suitable to make that U-turn, and the problem is they may try and it's not gonna work very well.
You're kind of funneling them into a problem.
So if we could widen the median, we can get the width to do the
How
U-turn
far down
there.
that McBride project gonna go?
They were gonna have pretty much every property, I think it was every property except one.
So I'm sure that you guys are doing this for a reason, but I'm just thinking that some of these driveways are gonna have an awful long drive to do a U-turn to come back, to go back into town center. We might, which is what it is, but if down the road, future planning, we think that, hey, this is probably going to be the most likely entrance to a new development, should that come in here, probably want to build that median accordingly.
That's what right now would be planned, that not only this, but also from the northern end, that any development, if it were to happen,
Would have to go in.
would need to go here. And that
So
would
then, I mean, I'm just saying, this second house in, it's got an awful long ways to go to come back around at the town center, which if it is what it is, but just sort of seems like a weird. This seems just a little odd to me, because this guy's gotta come all the way down and around, or he'll illegally go that way, which is more likely. So we wanna, if it's possible, I think we should maybe try to avoid that.
You know, he's just gonna park in his driveway and walk across.
Yeah, that's true. I guess maybe you're just walking that way.
I mean, I think this is supposed to be.
I think there's two there.
Okay.
But maybe not. I mean, I don't know, you know, I'm just saying we want to try to be as fair as we can.
Yep. There will be a curb cut wherever there's a curb cut, just as it's.
All right, well, I'm excited. This
Good
looks cool.
question.
Hope we see it.
Yeah. Anybody have anything else?
I know this is just for information item.
Yeah.
One item, just, it seems like there has been some verbal support, but with us moving forward with, right of way, establishing right of way on this, and there's gonna be a lot more discussion, obviously, with the development proposal coming back. The department did, it's included under the priority matrix that was just reviewed as a tier 1 project. If, I just wanted to kind of see if that is also aligned with what the committee's thinking. We don't want to be pushing forward on gas if.
Okay, I mean, I would say if it's a tier 1 project, and we've had a lot of these, I mean, I personally, I think unless you hear somebody go, don't do that, you should be doing all of the things.
That's what we're looking for too. Thank you.
All right. Up next, our fall tree project.
Councilmember Stuart Palmer, this is a recommendation to move forward with another tree planting project this fall. This is consistent with our activities for several years now, in large part because of the Emerald Ash Borer. We've had to replant trees to try to make up the ones that we have lost. We're actually, with this project, assuming we move forward, we will actually be pretty close to matching the trees we've lost by replanting. So we're getting to that point where we can say we've replanted to replace lost trees. So that's a really good thing, because it's taken a few years to get there. So we would like to move forward with another 200 tree planting project this fall. Omni Tree Service was a low bid from the last proposal that we put on the street about a year ago. They've actually agreed to hold their prices from spring and last year. So what we're putting together for you tonight is a recommendation to move forward with a project with Omni Tree Service to replant 200 more trees at a cost of $88,000. Again, that is using their bid price from a year ago. The cost was $440 per tree. Again, this will be number 15 container stock, which is the smaller trees. But by and large, we found them to be pretty successful. And if people are a little bit patient, they do catch up, generally speaking, with the bigger stuff when it's in the ground after a few years. So that is the recommendation. And having a arborist on staff is hugely beneficial to us in the success of this project. I guess I'll stop now, and if there's any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Mr. Mabry.
Motion for approval.
All right. Second by Mr. Backer. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor with moving ahead with our tree program, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Yeah, and just, I mean, for those of you guys that are new, just so you know, Mike now goes out and assesses whether these trees made it or not and marks them, and so they're getting, if they don't make it, they're getting replaced, which is great, because we went, for a couple years, we tried to do it as best we could, but it was a little bit harder to do. So Mike's, I will keep saying, Mike is doing an awesome job. Every time I interact with him, I learn something new, which is
He's
great.
also ramrodding the tree pruning, removal.
Yeah.
Addressing safety issues.
Yep.
So he's earning his keep.
He's doing good stuff. All right, so that brings us to the snow policy. Tom, did you want to hold off on this or? no?
Yeah, let's hold off on it.
Okay.
With the,
So somebody would like to, do you need a motion to hold off? Or we just, yeah, okay, we'll do a, anybody care to make a motion? We're gonna hold off on the snow policy one more time, made by Mr. Mabry, seconded by Mr. Backer. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Can we eradicate all of the qualitative adjectives and replace them with quantitative terminology, the shall, the shoulds? I'm probably becoming known as the guy that eats the shoulds in the cans and the mights and the mays. It's a shall. The contractors really love having concrete definitive deliverables. But then providing them wiggle words just encourages them to wiggle. And then the city ends up suffering pain, confusion. So there were quite a few of them. Just to belabor my point, generally would be about.
If you'd like to discuss it, we can certainly talk about it. It's on the agenda, council member.
Well, and it's just that it's not worth really continuing to make this an issue for tonight. It can be if the city agrees, if the staff agrees that there would be reason to contemplate the advantages and the benefits to the staff and the city to changing things like goals into deliverables. So goals category would become deliverables category. And it really, the contractors are going to add a safety of a couple few percent to when there's a question of doubt, hey, we better side to the side of coverage instead of thinking we can confuse our way out of this as a deliverable instead of just a goal. That's really all. Any more than I'm just gonna sound like I'm preaching.
All right, we'll talk about it. Well, you still want to make the motion or no?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
That we take.
motion second. All those in favor? Aye. All right. One more month, Rick. We're gonna get to this before it snows, I swear. Okay, MoDOT supplemental agreement request.
Chair Farmer, council members, this last one I think is a pretty simple one. So the Green Pines Park Connector Path project is moving forward. We are in progress with design of the project. However, we are a little behind getting the easements that we need to acquire for that project. As a result, we requested and received a one-year extension essentially from East West Gateway to complete the project and get it on the street for bidding. So with that extension request and approval, MoDOT is requesting that we issue or execute a supplemental agreement with MoDOT to formalize the extension of the schedule with MoDOT. So this is a request to move forward with the execution of a supplemental agreement that documents the schedule extension. And there is no cost to the city, direct cost to do the supplemental agreement or to extend the schedule for the project. And with that, I'll wrap up. If there's any specific questions, I'll do my best to address them at this time.
All right, any questions?
Make a motion to approve as Mr. Brown laid out, sorry.
All right, motion made by Mr. Backer. Anybody care to second? Seconded by Mr. Vanek. All those in favor, please say aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, you've got your supplemental agreement. That brings us to miscellaneous items. I don't have anything. You got anything, Tom? Anybody else? Okay, awesome. Who would like to make a motion to adjourn? Made by Mr. Backer, seconded by Mr. Vanek. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Thanks, everybody. It's been a long evening, but I think we got some good stuff done. We'll see you all next month.